viable choice for us.
So if Hamas is to survive in any form, do you accept, and if a two-state solution was on offer, would Hamas renounce violence and publicly recognize Israel's right to exist, just as the PLO did in 1993?
We have said it repeatedly. Our leadership repeatedly said it many times. If we have our own state, our independent state, Hamas is ready to convert itself into a political party, and our military wing will be part of the Palestinian national army. But this is when we achieve our freedom and independence, self-sovereignty. Before that, we have always the right to defend our people, to fight against or to struggle against the occupation by all means, including armed resistance. This is a genuine right of Palestinians to have their independent own state, regardless of recognition of any country, not only Israel.
Bassem Naim, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.
You are welcome.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
The return of the cold over Manitoba. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday morning on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. As we're just getting set for the day and to deliver the morning show, it's 3 minutes to 6 a.m. My name is Marcy Marcusa, and the show's on until 8:37 today. Our high today is going to be minus 18, so quite a difference, as we've mentioned. And with wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 35 this morning. Right now, the actual temperature is minus 21. So, yes, dress appropriately and get out into it for your Friday. Let's say good morning to the team. Mr. Abby Adiemi, why don't we start with you today? Abby's behind the controls. Abby's our technical producer, giving you a wave on YouTube, and Abby will also be covering the forecast on air. Speaking of YouTube, our YouTube producer is Kevin Ipatebo. Good morning, Kev. Kev's also in there with Abby. Of course, you can watch the show on YouTube. Corey Funk is in also this morning. Good morning to Corey. Corey's directing the program and will be covering the commute. Let's go to Heather Wells, who's here from our Manitoba News Centre with our news this morning and our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg City Council has slapped Russ Wyatt with a public reprimand. The Transcona councillor came under fire in 2023 after publicly suggesting Winnipeg's chief administrative officer be fired over a multi-million-dollar court judgment that went against the city. A report by an outside integrity commissioner said Wyatt should be made to apologize for his comments. He was given that chance yesterday, but refused. We'll hear more. And some post-secondary students wonder when Manitoba's government will make good on a promise to restore their health care coverage. That was a promise made 15 months ago. One student at the University of Manitoba says it's disappointing to have been given a false promise. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather will be with us, of course, throughout the morning. All right. Let's get to what's coming up on the show this morning. Corey took a walk, actually, yesterday down Main Street and visited a Cosmopolitan Florist. They've been in business there for decades and decades. The owner grew up in that business. She is frustrated and not necessarily hopeful about what's going to come next for that stretch of Main Street. So she talked to us all about it, and we're going to hear that interview with Corey and Astrid Lichty, who owns that florist, coming up in the program today. Also in the first hour of the show, we are going to be talking about looking for love in the Victorian era. There's an event that's coming up. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The show The Sex Lives of College Girls is being called this generation's Sex and the City, and it stars a Canadian, Umrit Kaur.
I realized that I think I was trying to use you as a way of getting over someone else.
She'll be here to tell you how she got plucked out of Markham, Ontario to be in this massive show, and how acting has helped her confront her insecurities. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm John Northcott.
That's coming on the 1st, Saturday. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
Oval Office remarks from Donald Trump confirm what's causing a great deal of concern in this country, that he'll impose tariffs on Canadian goods as of tomorrow. And with the clock ticking down, some of the most senior members of the Liberal government are in Washington, part of last-minute efforts ahead of that deadline. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, and Immigration Minister Mark Miller leading efforts south of the border. But Donald Trump seems determined to go ahead with it all. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington as well. Richard, what's the latest from the U.S. president on the tariffs?
Yeah, President Trump insists his punishing tariffs will take effect this weekend, but is now signaling Canadian-made oil imports may be exempt. Listen.
If the oil is properly priced, if they treat us properly, which they don't. Look, Mexico and Canada have never been good to us on trade. They've treated us very unfairly on trade. And we will be able to make that up very quickly because we don't need the products that they have.
Now, Trump says he'll make that decision soon. Canadian officials have been frantically lobbying the administration to reverse course, laying out the damage it would have on both economies and the supply chain. But Trump is using the threat of tariffs as a weapon to enact his domestic agenda. He's demanding his neighbors Mexico and Canada take more action to stop migration and drug flow into the U.S., or else he'd slap 25% tariffs. His nominee for Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said the tariffs will be implemented in phases. And White House officials are telling the Wall Street Journal that Trump may give a grace period before, which would give more time for negotiations with Canadian and Mexican officials.
Richard, Trump is already threatening more countries with tariffs. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he's targeting the so-called BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that he would slap 100% tariffs if they find an alternative currency to use against the U.S. dollar for global trade. Trump posting, say goodbye to selling into the wonderful U.S. economy. He's accusing those countries as being hostile.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thank you, Richard.
You bet.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney is expected to lay out his plan to abandon consumer carbon pricing this morning. Carney's campaign says the former Bank of Canada governor will make the announcement at an event in Halifax. In a statement ahead of that, Carney said the existing consumer pricing policy is divisive and he intends to replace it with a series of incentives for consumers to go green. Carney intends to keep industrial pricing in place, as his fellow leadership contender Chrystia Freeland has also pledged. Investigators in Washington now have the flight data recorders, also known as black boxes, from an American Airlines jet which collided with a U.S. Army helicopter Wednesday night. All 67 people on board the two aircraft were killed, and officials say they've pulled at least 28 bodies from the river's icy waters. The cause of the collision still under investigation. Due a preliminary report in 30 days. Among the many mourning the lives lost in the crash, the skating community. Several figure skaters and coaches were on the American Airlines flight. Olympians, young hopefuls, and their parents returning from a training camp. Julia Wong spoke with some Canadians who knew them.
Ekaterina Gordeva is finding solace at an Edmonton skating rink as she remembers her friends Vadim Naumov and Evgenia Shishkova, who died in the American Airlines crash. The trio were all on the 1994 Russian Olympic figure skating team.
They were great, beautiful pair team, very nice and kind people.
The pair and Gordeva later moved to the United States to coach.
Vadim was very patient always and keep pushing at the same time, being very understanding as a coach.
The close-knit skating community is reeling from the loss of the coaches and more than a dozen others. Olympic ice dancer Caitlin Weaver worked with several of the young skaters killed.
These are faces that I watch grow up year by year, and my students know them so well as well. And, these are their friends. These are their people. I'm devastated on every level.
The group was flying back from a training camp in Wichita when the mid-air collision happened.
These are the best youth skaters in the country. They have to be invited to this development camp. So really, we've lost a lot.
She, like many in the skating community, are holding on to one another to get through this disaster.
Honestly, I'm not sure how to move forward with this with my kids. Their loss is just as profound as mine. It's maybe not so much to guide, it's more just to be someone that they can lean on.
Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
The names of 3 more Israeli hostages to be freed tomorrow have been released. The Palestinian militant group Hamas announced today that the 3 are all men. They're Ofer Calderon, Keith Siegel, and Yarden Bibas. Their release is part of the negotiated ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. The number of Palestinian prisoners to be released has not been announced. U.S. Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for 2,500 children to be evacuated from Gaza for medical treatment. It comes as Israel's ban on UNRWA, the UN's main relief agency in Gaza, comes into effect. Critics of that decision are warning it will have a catastrophic impact. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
More than 400,000 Palestinians have returned to northern Gaza, carrying meager belongings or hoping to find something. Nothing left, says Bilal Naim. All the water wells are destroyed and food is hard to find, he says. No hospitals either. Aid delivery into Gaza has increased by hundreds of trucks every day since the ceasefire began. But that's now threatened, as the main UN agency coordinating aid, UNRWA, has been banned from Israel. Its Jerusalem offices closed yesterday. Israel says the agency has close ties with Hamas militants, something the UN denies. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says it's not clear if Israel will now try to stop shipments.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian operations in Gaza continues, including with UNRWA work there. UNRWA says it is committed to staying and delivering.
The UN is also calling for urgent medical evacuations for 2,500 children and their caregivers, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying they are at risk of imminent death. That process has been complicated through Israel, but may be easing as a key crossing into Egypt is reportedly opening today for patients. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And finally, a true crime saga that reads like a Quentin Tarantino script. An American murderer who evaded authorities in Missouri and Mexico hid for decades in a small Alberta town. Police say they've now closed the case on one of America's most wanted, a woman known as the Pistol Pockin' Mama. The CBC's Megan Grant has the details.
It all began unraveling with an anonymous tip, leading police to solve a 1960s cold case, but only after Sharon Kinney's death.
It's unfortunate we couldn't catch her when she was alive. She was really good at what she did. She hid really well.
Jackson County Sergeant Dustin Love speaking Thursday in Kansas City, announcing the end of the decades-old mystery. Fugitive Sharon Kinney had been hiding in southern Alberta under the name Dee Glabus. Glabus died in 2022 at the age of 81 in Tabor, a sleepy prairie town better known for its corn crop than crime stats. Kinney's former friends and neighbors are flabbergasted.
Well, it's amazing because it goes to show you that you don't really know people. To me, it seems like it's impossible. How can you fool the whole world?
The women say Glabus was known as a bridge-playing, banana bread baking volunteer and realtor. She moved to Tabor in 1973 with her new husband and a secret. Police say Kinney fatally shot 3 people in the 60s. Her first husband, then her new lover's wife, both killed within 3 months of each other. While awaiting trial, she fled to Mexico City. Within days, she'd murdered a man in a botched robbery. In 1969, 5 years into her 13-year sentence, Kinney escaped from Mexican prison, evading police until that anonymous tip, prompting authorities this week to close their cold case. Megan Grant, CBC News, Calgary.
Pistol packing mama, lay that pistol down.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Lay that pistol down, pistol packing mama. Lay that thing down before it goes off and hurts somebody. Oh, she kicked out my windshield and she hit me over the head. She cussed and cried and said I'd
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown, really cold Winnipeg, and thanks so much for joining us. We'll get into the forecast in a moment. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. It's the kind of day where I walked down my back steps off the porch, and it's just like wood, but the wood was like creaking as I was going. It's that kind of morning. Hopefully you plugged in your car. This hour on the show, we're going to be talking about looking for love in the Victorian era. We're going to hear more about a local event that's helping singles to mingle like it's 1895. Also, coming up this hour on the program, access to internet is fast becoming a basic human right, but so many Canadians living in rural areas continue to be left out. It's still very spotty, for example, around Lake Manitoba in points here in our province. We're going to talk to an advocate who continues to work on narrowing the digital divide. Also yesterday on World Report and Local, you might have heard about some producers being featured that are very concerned about the upcoming tariff threat that could become a real thing tomorrow. Confirmed threat, go from a threat to becoming a confirmed tariff tomorrow, rather, out of the States, the 25%. Today we're going to have a closer look at Canada's agriculture industry overall and what new tariffs might mean. So that's also coming up in the first hour of the show. Heather Wells joins us now. She is here, though, with news headlines and other stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a 2-year-old girl killed in Bloodvein First Nation last week is being remembered as a happy toddler. Roberta Goosehead says she raised her niece Josiah Young from birth. She says she gave the child to her maternal grandmother in October because she couldn't manage having a job and a young child. RCMP say the child was taken to the nursing station Friday with serious injuries. Her 56-year-old grandmother is charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg journalist is fighting to keep an interview out of the hands of police. City News reporter Morgan Majeski is challenging a production order obtained by detectives for a copy of an interview with the father of a man accused in a mass shooting. Majeski's lawyer says it's critical journalists maintain credibility, impartiality, and distance from police. We'll hear more about that in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Did your car start this morning?
Oh, no, I'm in an underground heated garage.
I always forget. Yeah, right. We should be asking Abby this question.
Yeah.
Abby?
It did start. But
you had it plugged in?
I had to spend some time allowing it to warm up inside because it was kind of cold in there.
I know. And it sounds like did it sound like it was coughing at you when it's trying to start? That's always what I think an engine sounds like when it's trying to turn over.
Well, I will not say that because I started it around I think before going to bed at 11 because I knew it was going to be cold in the morning.
Smart.
Then when I woke up around 3, I also started it again to just warm up itself. And then, so I guess I didn't notice that.
You're a good battery daddy. Your battery's thanking you. Thanks for taking care of me. All right, let's get into the actual temperature and the numbers.
What a switch we saw from that mild conditions the last past 2-3 days. And then we just, province is in for a chilly one today. We're looking at temperatures ranging from frigid up north, and then we'll see cold condition across the southern regions. We do have that extreme cold warning in place for northern Manitoba still, with the dangerous wind chills expected impacting regions from Lynn Lake all the way down to Brochet. But looking at condition in Winnipeg and surrounding areas right now, minus 22. Clear skies we're seeing for today. We should see these clear conditions all morning, but clouds will return as you get into the afternoon. It will be a frigid day for folks in Winnipeg. We do warm up to a high of minus 18 though. The wind chill is something you need to take into consideration this morning as you start your day. It feels like minus 35 this morning, so you want to bundle up. Across board, we're looking at cold temperatures, sunshine in the south, northern regions extreme cold. The Red River Valley having temperatures around minus 35. That's the wind chill. Cold conditions from Westman all the way down to the Parkland region with wind chills around minus 38. Marcy, I was stepping out this morning, getting into the car, and I noticed the wind smashing into my face. And I was thinking about Corey. And I'm like, I hope he's not going to run today.
Did you run?
I did, and it hurt.
Because it was hurt. He was hurting me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend. Yeah, I even had something covering my face, but it was still my eyes were watering and and especially after all these warm days, you kind of. It's so funny how quickly you kind of forget what.
Does your chest hurt? You breathe and it's cold like this.
Actually, that wasn't so bad. It was mostly just my eyes were watering the whole way. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yay.
Abby and I could lie and say we're going to start running, but no.
Maybe in summer.
Oh, fair enough.
There you go. Exactly. Everyone's learning to come summer. I get that.
All right. The commute this morning, what do we got?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of any major issues out there, but if you're walking, biking, and driving, you do see something. Maybe you want to wear goggles if you're running. Maybe that's my one tip. 204-788-3093.
Well, from goggles to corsets. Next on the show, in the world of modern dating digitally often comes before face-to-face interaction. I get to know someone online. But this February 14th for Valentine's Day, the Dalnavert Museum wants you to put the phone away and step into the past. Their Victorian Valentine's Day parties can allow singles to mingle like it's 1895. Samantha Machado is the museum services manager over at Dalnavert, and she joined up to Speed host Faith Findal in the studio yesterday afternoon to talk about this.
How does one look for love in the Victorian era?
Yeah, well, the exciting thing about the Victorian era is that it was a time when people were really starting to take back agency in their love lives. So when you think about the past and dating, you probably think of a woman being forced to marry some guy that she's never met because her parents want her to.
Right.
And in the Victorian era, we're really starting to see the emergence of people who are getting married because they actually enjoy each other's company. It's not necessarily as common as it is today, but it was starting to become more common. And so people were really having an opportunity to look for love in ways that they never were before.
And when we think of breaking the ice, I mean, back then, parlor games were a big thing. What sorts of games are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, parlor games were a big deal in all sorts of social interactions. There weren't phones like we have nowadays to stare at when things got awkward. But,
right, or friends to call you to rescue you in case things aren't going well.
Yeah, exactly. So at our Victorian Valentine's Day party, we're going to be enjoying some of the parlor games specifically that might have been used to help you find love. So certain superstitions and games of that sort. One that we might recognize nowadays is peeling an apple to figure out the first initial of the person that you're going to fall for.
Huh.
Yeah,
okay,
not necessarily.
How does that work? I'm trying to envision how that works practically. So you
peel an apple, and then you're kind of peeling a long strip, and then that strip would fall to the floor in the shape of a letter. And I'm going to say if your name started with O, you probably had a lot better luck than a lot of other people. Not going to be a very easy time making a W or a Q or anything like that.
It's fascinating because a lot of these parlor games were actually played on Halloween. Why Halloween of all times?
Yeah, the Victorians were pretty macabre. So Queen Victoria, as you may or may not know, was in mourning for most of her life after her husband died. And so the air of death kind of caught on socially, and people were very into that. So some of these parlor games, especially when we think about the superstitions underlying them and how that might connect to superstitions around witchcraft and that sort of thing, they were also popular at Halloween.
So outside of peeling an apple, are there other things that singles going to this event will get to do to get to know one another?
Yeah, so obviously we're a museum, and so we have this great historic house for people to come and enjoy. And our hope is that some of the singles and hopefully would-be couples will get to hang out in the semi-romantic environment of our historic mansion. But in addition to that, we'll have some other games going on. I don't want to spoil all the fun, but there certainly will be some more explorations of Victorian traditions that will hopefully help you find someone to hang out with.
I mean, people who are coming, what if they want to dress in the Victorian era clothing? Is that something that you allow/encourage?
Yeah, so as long as you can safely walk around, we encourage you to come out in whatever clothing you want to wear. It's good to always be yourself first and foremost, so something that you're comfortable in. And if that happens to be Victorian attire, then we'd love to see you come out in it.
What does Victorian attire look like? Are we thinking big dresses that might knock things off?
That sort of waistline, I think, is a little bit before the era we're talking about. Of course, what you would look at in terms of dress would vary greatly depending on class.
Right.
So it would depend on what sort of style you're going for.
Are there Victorian courtship rituals that have not aged well?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the things that we think about when we think about the past are obviously present in the Victorian era. So women, though they were getting more freedom of choice in their relationships, often would have still had to have their parents' permission, specifically their fathers.
Right.
And of course, same-sex marriage wasn't a thing back then. And, we want to be explicitly clear that anyone of any sexuality is welcome in our event. But a lot of the courtship rituals that we think of nowadays kind of have their roots in these earlier times. So,
do you have an example?
Yeah, well, if you think about people on Tinder or a dating app, that sort of thing to me links back to the matrimonial advertisements of the past, where people would put ads in newspapers saying, "Hey, I'm looking for someone, come and get me." That to me looks a lot like our modern day dating apps, although with varying degrees of success.
I am never going to look at Tinder the same way. Of course, this is an opportunity for people who are looking for love to meet face to face. Have you thought about what you'll do should that happen?
Yeah, well, I haven't thought all the way through, but we maybe could. We do offer weddings at the museum. We're a great wedding venue. And so depending on how successful your relationship is, we might be willing to offer you a discount on a wedding at the museum in the future.
Samantha Machado there in conversation with CBC's Faith Fundal. She is the museum's services manager for Dalnavert and the Visitors Center in Winnipeg. The Victorian Valentine's Day party is happening on February 14th in the evening.
For breaking news as it happens, stay with CBC News. For the latest updates and what it means for Canadians, stay with CBC News. When the biggest stories break, both at home and around the world, stay with CBC News.
Time right now is 6:22 a.m. It's minus 23 in Winnipeg. The sky is clear, and it is a high of minus 18 that we'll be going for today. With wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 35, and all you can do is smile and bundle up and hope that hope that nothing breaks in this extreme cold. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. When you work in radio, you really get a good sense of where there is a digital divide in existing. And that is because when you go out and try to do a live remote in Manitoba, your equipment has to have a signal. You have to have internet. You have to have service. And I can't tell you how many times that we've run into challenges, especially around a real pocket around St. Laurent and around Lake Manitoba. Let's talk about what is happening across the country when it comes to digital divide. Those of us who live in cities have fast and reliable internet, but Canadians in those rural areas often do not. There is an organization that works in improving that. It's called the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, or CIRA. It has come out with a tool now to help measure whether internet providers are actually giving the service that people are paying for. Jeff Buell is with us via Zoom. He's manager with CIRA. Good morning.
Hi, Marcy. How are you?
I'm well. So can you explain a little bit more about this test that I mentioned that Canadians can use to measure their internet?
Sure. So like you said, any Canadian can go online if they're connected to the internet and run what is a new and improved internet performance test. So that lives at performance.cira.ca. And so they can run the test and learn how fast their internet connection is for free with just a couple clicks of the button. So the test runs under real-world conditions, so anyone can see their speeds, obviously, and then understand how their speeds will be used for common applications like Zoom or Netflix, as an example. One really important part of the test is that the data is captured and anonymized and added to a big crowdsourced database that can help identify where internet upgrades are most urgently needed.
It's interesting because I was mentioning, some of our recent remote locations, and they're not that remote, like to point this out. Well, the place I was talking about, St. Laurent, is, literally you can get there like in pretty much like an hour and 10 minutes. And yet the connectivity is gone. What I was surprised at, though, is this has been happening for years in Manitoba. But now when we went, and this was just last year, people were all buying Starlinks. They kind of were solving their own problems because they were, frustrated with service and such. How big is the digital divide in Canada? What are you hearing from other communities?
Yeah, so really good examples, Marcy, and you're right that you don't have to. If you look at the internet performance test map and you zoom in on Winnipeg, you can see visually exactly what you're talking about. is that we visualize it with different colored hexagons. So blue is generally pretty good, and red is not so good. So when you look at Winnipeg, you're right. You see these little pockets of red, and then when you zoom back out, you can start seeing the areas outside of the city that do have poor connectivity. And you can see that pattern all across the country. And it's interesting. I think most people understand that, you know, the far north and very remote areas are likely going to be underserved by a lot of infrastructure. But it is surprising to see this pattern across the country where these little pockets, as I said, right next to urban areas. So when we talk about the digital divide, that's usually refers to the gap in access between rural and urban Canada. So what we're seeing, just again, in talking in generalities, rural speeds are less than half as fast on average again. Typically less stable internet connection and more expensive internet connection than urban areas. So mostly the reason for this is because service providers, so those people that give you the internet to your home or business, see a lower return on investment to provide services into those low population areas. Often those low population areas have rugged terrain too. So lots of lakes, lots of trees. You know, these are things that people can relate to in Manitoba. So it's difficult to build the infrastructure, and that's why government investment is needed and steps in to provide those services, or help provide those services, I should say.
You know, years ago when we were having this conversation, people were thinking, well, internet, it's a luxury. Talk about how the lack of access to high-speed internet today and how that affects people and also businesses. What do you hear on that front?
Yeah, it's really funny because believe it or not, I've been doing this for about 20 years, working in the rural internet field. And I remember having those conversations early on where we'd go around and talk about it. And the issue of lack of access in rural communities didn't really resonate. And so now it's just a given, right? Individuals, when you have poor connectivity, you just can't access essential services. So whether that's accessing government portals, virtual healthcare, education, all those things. Families can't connect, so it prevents, like, say, grandparents having that FaceTime video call with their grandkids that live across the country. Businesses, poor connectivity means that can't be as competitive. They can't market and sell their products online to online shoppers because that's how we buy things now. So if I didn't mention already, I'm also a rural Canadian, so I have fairly limited connectivity myself. So while I'm talking to you on this call, I'm sitting here trying to listen for my kids waking up, because if they get up and get on their devices, it's going to, you know, diminish my call quality. And so, you know, like you're talking about being on remotes, it becomes garbled and you know, my video quality may get worse, or my words may get garbled. So all those things.
And now all of the listeners are going to understand why when we are on remote in certain places in Manitoba, if everything sounds great and all of a sudden it doesn't, sometimes the coffee shop just filled up and one too many people got on the internet line, and then all of a sudden, that's exactly what's going on. So tell me a little bit more about why you think this test will help, and what you think ultimately needs to change to improve the digital divide in this country.
Sure. So the test is, captures information from consumers. So it's a real opportunity for people to run the test and get that instant feedback on their connectivity. So to see if they're getting what their service provider commits to, but also it helps build, as I mentioned, that database so we can map and really pinpoint exactly where those areas of investment are needed. So what I think is, like, the government has established a target of wanting every Canadian to have service at a certain level, and that's 50 megabits per second down and 10 megabits per second up. Governments have invested. They know that it's a priority. Over the last few years, there's been private-public partnerships that have put in $7 billion to upgrade rural infrastructure. And it is making a difference. we can see that in the data that we've captured. We can see a trend line going up of connectivity getting better and better in rural areas. But the interesting thing is that it's moving at the same pace as urban areas. So even though things are improving, that gap between rural and urban speeds remains very persistent.
Where can people go online, just because we're short on time and have to get to the news, Jeff, but where can people go online to read more about what we're talking about and to see the test we're talking about?
Thanks for asking. So performance.cira.ca. They can go and see the information and run tests.
Excellent. CIRA is CIRA. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks. My pleasure. Anytime.
This is Jeff Buell, joined us via Zoom, manager with CIRA, the national nonprofit, best known for managing the .ca domain for Canadians. So performance.cira.ca to check out your area or input some data there. Right now, it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:31. It is minus 23 degrees. January's letting you know it's still here for one last day. We do warm up, though, again for the weekend. But for today, a high of minus 18. Families say a toddler from Bloodvein who was killed last week loved to dance. Roberta Goosehead says she raised her 2-year-old niece, Josiah Young, from birth. She says Josiah loved all kinds of music. Goosehead has many videos of them dancing together.
I threw her a big hotel party, and because her older sister was close to her birthday, that I decided to make it a double birthday for her and her sister. And little did I know that was going to be her last birthday.
Goosehead gave the child to her maternal grandmother in October because she couldn't manage having a job and a young child. RCMP say Josiah was taken to the nursing station in Bloodvein with serious injuries on Friday. Her 56-year-old grandmother is now charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg journalist is fighting to keep an interview out of the hands of police. City News reporter Morgan Majeski is challenging production order obtained by detectives. Police want a copy of his unedited interview with Randall Chummy Fagnan. His son is charged in a mass shooting in November of 2023 at a rooming house on Langside. Officers argue Fagnan's interview is relevant because he refused to give investigators a full statement. Majeski's lawyer, Ian McKinnon, says handing over the interview would be a slippery slope.
Journalists, it's critical to maintain certain credibility and impartiality and distance from certainly the police and the Crown, and be objective and not seen to be in any way connected as some sort of investigative arm of the police or the state.
Majeski's employer, Rogers Media, is allowing Majeski to challenge this order. No date for a decision has been given. International students hope Manitoba's government will soon keep a promise to restore their health coverage. The former Progressive Conservative government got rid of universal coverage for international students in 2018. NDP leader Wab Kinew promised to reinstate it before being elected premier in 2023. But 15 months later, students are still waiting. Aditya Gandhi is majoring in environmental studies at the University of Manitoba.
Things can take time, but it's disappointing as an international student for sure to almost have a false promise made.
The NDP government says it is reviewing how best to provide health care coverage to international students. A Winnipeg City Councillor has been publicly reprimanded for his treatment of a civil servant. Russ Wyatt came under fire for comments made in 2023. The Transcona councillor publicly suggesting the city's CAO be fired over a multi-million-dollar court judgment that went against the city. A report by an outside integrity commission said Wyatt should be made to apologize. He was given one last chance at last night's council meeting, but refused. Mayor Scott Gillingham cast one of 12 votes in favor of reprimanding Wyatt.
We can do our jobs with diligence and effectively holding the public service to account. We can do so in a manner, though, that is consistent with the rules of the Code of Conduct that we've established and we agreed to.
Wyatt insists he did nothing wrong. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney says he will dump the Trudeau government's carbon pricing policy if he becomes party leader. In a release issued overnight, Carney says his plan is to replace it with a series of incentives encouraging consumers to go green. But like his fellow leadership contender Chrystia Freeland, Carney says he would keep carbon pricing in place for large industry. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 7. A Brandon school principal says rising food costs have some students going hungry over the weekend. That's why the school division is partnering with Manitoba Harvest to give take-home snacks to 600 students every Friday. Robert Dinsdale is principal at King George School. His school and Betty Gibson School received their first delivery of meals to go yesterday.
The cost of food in general across the country, the province, is significant, and families feel that, and so we know that well-fed students are better set up to learn. Anything we can do to support our learners is something we'll advocate for.
Meals to Go is a breakfast program that started in Winnipeg. Along with Brandon, it recently expanded to Opaskwayak Cree Nation. And he was just called up.
Ford with a chance, and he shoots and scores! Parker Ford, in his first NHL game, has his first NHL goal.
Parker Ford in the second period on TSN as the Jets beat the Bruins 6-2. Ford had just been called up from the Manitoba Moose to play in Boston, his hometown, with family, friends in the stands.
My whole life I've wanted to do this for my family, and it's probably going to be emotional when I go see them here, but, they've done so much, and I feel like I owe it to them to have a little bit of fun coming to these games.
Also last night, Mark Scheifele scoring his 31st goal of the season, tying Ilya Kovalchuk with his 328th career goal, joining Kovalchuk atop the Jets Thrashers' all-time goal list. Next up, Washington is in a battle. Winnipeg's in Washington for a battle of the NHL's top two teams, and that is tomorrow night. You can find more news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather.
Welcome.
Heather Wells in our news center. All right, let's get into this very cold forecast. We knew the weather would turn, and whoa, it's turned.
Yes, well below freezing mark across the province, and it's even feeling colder in the northern parts of the province. Looking at conditions for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're seeing temperatures around -22, -23 at this time. Winnipeg mainly clear, -22. We are waking up to some clear conditions. This should clear as you get into the afternoon period. Some cloudy conditions will roll in. Then we warm up to a high of -18. However, it's going to get much colder with the wind chill factored in. It will be feeling like -35 this morning. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. Temperatures also hovering around -22, -23 with that wind chill around -35. Heading west to Brandon, -22 at this time. Light snow is being spotted in that part of the province. For the Westman region, you should see a cold day dipping to a low of -20. You're going to stay around this -22 for most of the day, and the wind chill makes it even feel colder. In the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at -29 at this time. Clear conditions you are seeing. Expect a high of -19, though with the wind chill factored in, it will be feeling like -38 this morning. Gimli is at -26. Partly cloudy skies we are seeing there. The Interlake region will be seeing mostly sunny skies once these cloudy conditions roll out. Then in the afternoon period, we see some clouds moving. You do warm up to 19 degrees later in the day, though, and then tonight you drop. Your temperatures will be dropping further. In the Pamphlet Flown, temperatures hovering around -37, -38 at this time. Expect plenty of sunshine today. That should warm you up to about -21 later in the day, though the wind chill this morning makes it feel like -40. Good morning to our friends in Thompson. You are sitting at -32 at this time. Clear conditions you're seeing. Expect your high to be around -23, though the wind chill is around -43 this morning. It is frigid. It will remain like that all day. Conditions in Churchill, we're seeing temperatures around -26 with ice crystals. The forecast calls for a mix of sun and cloud for that part of the province. High will be around -28. -48. However, the wind chill feels like -43, and it may get to -45 later in the day. Marcy, down south, temperatures cold, but not as brutal as what we're seeing in the northern part of the province. It is bitterly cold. We're seeing that temperatures close to -40, actual temperatures, and the wind chill almost 46, 47.
Oh, just stop.
Minus, not just minus.
Right? Yeah, minus.
So compared to Winnipeg, it is cold in the northern part of the province.
Stick around. I want to ask you a question in a minute, but first let's get the commute with Corey.
Yeah, so far I haven't heard of major issues here in the city. I will say on the highways in the north, visibility might be an issue, particularly highways around the Paw, Grand Rapids, even further north in Thompson, Lynn Lake, Gillam. Seeing partly covered conditions on the highways there, so be careful if you're hitting the highways this morning up north. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, Corey, you stay tuned for a sec. We've got this item coming up this half hour about birth order. And as you know, there's always, a lot of studies about, depending what your personality is like. And they say there's traits that are common if you're oldest, middle, youngest. And but we have this item coming up to talk about who's the favorite. And then whether or not, people perceive that and what the parents say. But so I just thought
not me.
Oh, look at he answered without even. What do you mean definitely not you?
I was the middle child.
Okay.
So, and I didn't get that chance to be a favorite child because they will tell you, don't speak to your elder brother or elder sister like that. And then they tell you, what do you think your younger brother is going to do? Is looking up to you. So I was like the guy in the middle, always getting they blame me for everything in the house.
Look at, that was a very quick answer for Abby.
I grew up becoming a wise old person that would be in the middle and not want to get on the bad side of my parents. So I know I wasn't the favorite. I was the middle child.
Okay, so the middle children out there, we'll see. You can call us, by the way, see if that resonates with you. I was the youngest. I am the youngest, but I would say that because of my personality, I kind of was like the oldest. I hope my sister's not listening. She knows this. But I sort of always was that kid that was like, I'm kind of like you. I was like 90 before I was 12, I think. I took everything really seriously and did a lot of stuff. Like, I was that person all the time. I mean, it was I think I was fun, but yeah, I always felt very serious. So yeah, I don't know. Favorite-wise, I'm not sure.
Favorite? No.
I don't know. No. Okay, Abby's like, nope. Corey, Corey's interesting.
I'm an only child, so I contain multitudes. Yeah, I'm simultaneously the favorite, but also simultaneously the least favorite. But honestly, for the most part, I was mostly the favorite. Let's be serious.
788-3205. If you feel like weighing in, it's Friday, so we're having a bit of fun. But we do have this item coming up in a moment, so that's coming up still ahead this half hour. First, though, we have business news with Krista Lee Ramlakan, who's often here on mornings where we have these little chats. So I don't know if you care to weigh in on this one.
Hey, Marcy. So biologically, I'm an only child, but I have an older stepbrother and stepsister. So I'm only/baby. So
what's that like? Do you feel like you're favorited?
I don't know if I was necessarily favorited. Well, maybe my mom's favorite, but I kind of feel like I was always like a peacekeeper.
Got it.
Like, I feel like I was always like, everyone's nuts, and I'm just going to try to like keep the peace.
I realized as we started chatting about this that most people are not going to be calling the listener line because it's sort of really like it requires you to talk a lot about your family. But we will hear though what Blair Sanderson found out in his story. So that's following your business news. I know you're starting again with U.S. President Donald Trump because tomorrow's the day, right? Still holding firm that Canadian goods are going to see this 25% tariff. What do we understand about whether or not there could be any exceptions?
Well, Trump is still weighing whether Canadian oil will be a tariff target. So Canada is the U.S.'s number one source of oil imports. 60% of U.S. crude oil imports were sourced from Canada in 2022. And Trump may be tiptoeing around this oil issue due to some of his campaign messaging. That's because he has repeatedly promised to lower the cost of living, but federal data suggests that a 25% tariff on Canadian oil could cause the price at the pump to increase by 75 cents US a gallon overnight. Now, Trump has shifted back and forth when stating his reasoning for slapping tariffs on Canada. So while he initially indicated that tariffs needed to be levied in order to spur the Canadian government to enhance border security. The president has also complained about trade deficits. Now, the U.S. government's own data suggests that the trade and goods deficit with Canada was $55 billion U.S. as of November. But Canadian officials have argued that when oil exports are excluded, the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Canada.
We'll see what tomorrow brings. Next, we have news that the federal government may actually reverse course on the capital gains tax.
Yeah, so CBC News has learned that the federal government is likely to reverse course on increases to the capital gains tax that were announced in the last federal budget. So the Liberal government could delay implementing those changes, according to a high-level source with knowledge of the government's plans. Now, the exact plan hasn't been finalized, but a key option on the table includes ordering the CRA to stop collecting the new taxes for now. And delaying collection would likely push any final decision about the changes until after the next federal election, which could effectively kill the tax increase. Now, industry lobby group, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which opposed the increase, says this is welcome news. But economist and director of the Centre for Future Work, Jim Stanford, is criticizing the potential walkback.
The proposal to incrementally reform capital gains taxation and partly close down this enormous loophole that benefits rich people and rich people alone was a good idea. It was fair, and it would raise revenue that was needed for important things like affordable housing or dental care or pharmacare. Now it seems like this good idea is collateral damage in all of the political uncertainty that has gripped both Parliament, but also Canada.
Now, the changes had been considered a core part of the last federal budget, which was branded as bringing fairness to every generation. So it had proposed increasing taxes on capital gains above $250,000 for individuals, changing the inclusion rate from 1/2 to 2/3. And then all capital gains for corporations and trusts would have increased to 2/3 as well.
And before we quickly look at markets here, Walmart's planning on investing more in its businesses here in Canada?
Yes, so Walmart Canada says it's going to spend $6.5 billion over the next 5 years as it opens dozens of new stores. The retailer says the investment is the largest it has made since it entered Canada 30 years ago. And this is all going to mean more competition for other grocers. Here's Lisa Hutchison, who is a retail expert and managing partner at JC Williams Group.
This has been new, these supercenters, but certainly customers are looking for convenience. And, having these supercenters with multi-categories and these big stores, sort of one-stop shopping, is certainly, a part of that strategy. So not only the local grocers, but also, the likes of a Costco.
And this news comes as Walmart is selling its fleet service as well. Now, Walmart says third-party carriers already handle about half its fleet business. And the company says no fleet staff will be laid off as part of this sale because the new company will take on the workers when the deal closes.
What do the numbers say?
In Europe, stocks are rising. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mostly on the rise. Japan is up. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is down 10 cents to $72.63 US per barrel. Gold is up $9.30 to $2,804.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.02 of a cent to 69.1 cents US.
All right, Crystalie Ramlakan, you're our favorite business reporter. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Marcy.
We'll talk to Crystalie on Monday. Well, let's get to that story about birth order and favorites. If you ask any parents, they won't answer, likely, who their favorite is. But there's a new study published in the American Psychological Association. It suggests the answer is actually more complicated than just who's your favorite. Researchers found parents sometimes do favor one child over another. It's based on things like birth order, maybe, gender, temperament, personality. And just the latest in a string of studies aimed at better understanding the topic, of course. Now, this got Blair Sanderson from CBC wondering how siblings perceive their own experiences. And he hit the street to find out.
Hello. Hello. How many brothers and sisters do you have? I have 4. Oldest sister, then a brother, and then a sister, and then me, and then my younger sister.
I have 2 sisters.
older and younger.
I have one sibling.
I have 8.
4, 6.
2. Did your parents have a favorite?
My mother definitely had a favorite, and that was the baby. Might be partly because he was so unexpected. She thought she was in menopause, and then all of a sudden...
And that made him actually a favorite?
Yes.
Yeah. My middle sister. That's uncommon, but the middle child in my family is probably the favorite.
Now,
Yeah.
why are you so sure that you're not the favorite?
Because I've been told many times that I'm not the favorite.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and I can, it's kind of one of those things too. I'm older. You can see it in the parents' faces when their kids come up to you. The girls are still young. They don't tell me it directly, but like I said, I pick it up.
I just know. It's pretty obvious.
In what way?
Just like growing up my whole life, I feel like it's been pretty evident. Just a feeling.
I think both of my parents, they like to spend time with one kid in particular, but they love them all. I think it's similarity. I think one kid in my family is very similar to one parent, and another kid's very similar to the other parent, and so it's really easy for them to just hang out and have fun. And your parents, though, never admit this? They always say, no, there's no favorite, but I don't believe it. What about you? Favorite?
I don't think they have favorites.
We're all each on an even keel.
Yeah, honestly, I think my parents, they do a great job at like supporting all of us equally, and it really shows like we are like the oldest, middle, youngest. We don't think we fit into those, and we don't think our parents like have any like we think they love us all very much.
What about you?
Definitely the golden child.
You are?
Oh, yeah.
So how does that feel to be the golden child? Do you maybe feelings of guilt?
No feelings of guilt. No. We're all pretty similar, but I definitely get away with a little more than everyone else.
Do you think it's wrong, though, that your parents have so clearly made this, evident that you are the favorite?
No, because it's me.
Nah, I don't want to brag. But I definitely think one of the parents likes me quite a lot. And do the other siblings know this and talk to you about it? Oh, yeah, they bully me all the time for it. It's kind of like a give and take, One of us gets to be the favorite, and the other ones get to make fun of them for it every time. So there's a downside to being a favorite? Of course there is. The other kids know.
It'd be my little brother. And I just chalk it up to my sister and I paved the way for him. We just exhausted my parents, so he had it pretty easy.
And now the other personal question, do you have kids?
I do.
And do you have a favorite?
I'll never say. No, I don't have a favorite. I love all my kids equally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the parents always say that after discussing how their parents had a favorite.
I know. There are favorite things I like about each one of them, but no favorites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You guys are my favorites.
Oh, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
It is 9 minutes now to 7 o'clock. If you want to weigh in with your own experience, once again, 788-3205. Having some Friday fun. Minus 23 on this morning in Winnipeg. It is clear out there, very cold, and we have that extreme cold continuing for Lynn Lake, Leaf Puck, Brochet, and Taduli Lake with wind chill values around minus 45. Winnipeg's going to feel like minus 35 with wind chill, so our weather has taken the turn. Well, next on the show, according to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, the industry is responsible for 1 in 9 jobs. How's the potential U.S. tariff going to affect that? 25% could go into effect tomorrow, or could be confirmed tomorrow. We heard from Manitoba producers this week. Next, let's talk to Stuart Smythe, professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of Saskatchewan. He holds the industry-funded research chair in agri-food innovation and sustainability enhancement at the school as well. Good morning to you. We're having a challenge with the audio, obviously. So we're going to try once again to see if we can hear each other. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Nice to talk to someone on the prairies about this. What do you think of these tariffs and the trade disputes? What's the impact on ag going to be?
I'm optimistic it's going to be minimal. Food prices was an important election in the American presidential election last year. And so food price inflation hit 2.5% in December. So food price inflation has been going up in the United States throughout the fall. So I don't think that Trump is going to want to put tariffs on food prices and inflate those concerns, with all voters across the U.S. So I'm optimistic that the bulk of what's produced in Canada in terms of agriculture, beef, pork, and then crops, dairy, all these kinds of things will be minimally impacted if tariffs are implemented over the weekend.
What sectors do you think are most vulnerable?
Supply management. Trump went after supply management when the NAFTA agreement was renegotiated into the CUSMA agreement in 2017. So Canada made considerable concessions in the supply management sector, and I would expect that as part of the reassessment of the CUSMA agreement that Trump wants to fast track this year, that would be an area of focus for the Americans.
How intertwined, just so people that may not have been leaning into sort of the stories we did with producers here in Manitoba this week, our national reporter Karen Pauls posted yesterday online, what different producers we're talking about here. But how intertwined is the ag industry with the American market?
Very intertwined. About $40 billion worth of products are imported by the United States directly from Canada. There's lots of examples across the production sector in ag where over 50% of what's produced in Canada is exported to the United States.
Fletcher Berger, who's an associate professor at the University of Manitoba here in the economics department, was talking about, what might happen in terms of if producers here end up with excess supply. Then that could drive down the sale price, of course, of their products if a trade war gets drawn out. So he's looking ahead. Do you think what does drawn out mean? Like, how I'm trying to get a sense of how quickly we might see the impact should this have, should this all go through?
He's certainly right in saying that could have price impacts. I think the Canadian commodity export sector is, they've been aware that tariffs have been coming. I would expect that they're seeking alternative markets, whether those markets are in Latin America, Asia, Europe, or the Middle East. So they'll be trying to move our trade reliance away from the U.S. to other markets. Yes, there would be additional costs in getting Canadian products to those other markets compared to serving the U.S. market, but not significant costs. So I think there's certainly trade opportunities around the world that will be very price dependent, and the Canadian export sector should be actively seeking out how to enhance those opportunities.
What have you heard, if anything, about concerns from people who are on the inside of this?
Yeah, certainly, producers that are very, more so in the niche market. So if they're producing a specialty crop that's exported into the U.S., they said, if tariffs increased and reduced their exporting opportunities, or worst case scenario, really brought it almost to a halt by this summer or into the fall, they'd be in a loss situation and in severe fiscal problems for their operations.
What will happen to, I think a lot of the consumers are wondering, what might happen to food prices in Canada if we start imposing retaliatory tariffs?
Yeah, so similarly, I'm very hopeful that the Canadian government won't put tariffs on things that are of nutritional importance for our diets. Say oranges out of California, Florida as an example, or fresh produce from the Southwest U.S. That would just simply raise food prices for all Canadians, and at least 8 out of 10 Canadians are saying food prices are a major challenge. So hopefully it would go to non-food items, automobile parts or those types of things. If it was in the agri-food sector, I suspect it would likely be on luxury items. So wines or other products that are nice to have, but not nutritiously essential.
Thanks for your time this morning, Stuart. It's a piece of our ongoing coverage. We're actually going to be talking to a local coffee importer here in Winnipeg coming up on the show. So thanks for starting us off this morning.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of your morning.
You as well. That's Stuart Smythe. He's a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics over at the University of Saskatchewan. So that interview with the coffee importer coming up later. Right now, it's time to touch base with Heather Wells, who has our news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg journalist is fighting to keep an interview out of the hands of police. City News reporter Morgan Majeski is challenging a production order obtained by detectives for a copy of an interview with the father of a man accused in a mass shooting. Winnipeg City Council has slapped Russ Wyatt with a public reprimand. The Transcona councillor came under fire for comments made about Winnipeg's CEO. He was given a chance to apologize yesterday but refused. Our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much, Heather. It is minus 23 in Winnipeg. Today's high minus 18 with wind chill minus 35. Everything's creaking. It's so cold out there, so make sure you're bundled up, especially if you're walking or if you're waiting for the bus. Coming up in the next hour of the program, a long-time North End florist who's been in business on Main Street for decades has racked up tens of thousands in damage, she says, from vandalism over the years. And recently, she says, claiming insurance isn't even worth it. That story's coming up. Stay with us.
Today on The Current.
Over the weekend, the post was cut down and the camera was completely destroyed.
Vandals across the country have been smashing speed trap cameras. This is a technology that brings out some big feelings in people. Some advocates say the cameras do make streets safer. Others say we need to rethink our roads more broadly. Coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
It's coming on the 1st, Saturday, and I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico.
Oval Office remarks from Donald Trump confirm what's causing a great deal of concern in this country. With the clock ticking down, some of the most senior members of the Liberal government are in Washington, part of last-minute efforts ahead of that deadline. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, and Immigration Minister Mark Miller leading efforts south of the border. On this side of the border, the Prime Minister is chairing a meeting of the Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. All of that just on the federal level. But with Donald Trump, he seems to be determined to go ahead with it all, and that's where we begin our coverage. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. Richard, what's the latest from the U.S. president on the tariffs?
Yeah, President Trump insists his punishing tariffs will take effect this weekend, but is now signaling Canadian-made oil imports may be exempt. Take a listen.
Those tariffs may or may not rise with time. Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
Now, Trump also said he hasn't made a final decision, but 25% tariffs on Canadian oil would likely drive up gas prices on Americans. Canadian officials have been frantically lobbying the administration to reverse course, laying out the damage it would have on both economies and the supply chain. But Trump is using the threat of tariffs as a weapon to enact his domestic agenda. He's demanding his neighbors Mexico and Canada take more action to stop migration and drug flow into the U.S., or else he'd slap 25% tariffs. His nominee for Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said the tariffs will be implemented in phases. And White House officials are telling the Wall Street Journal that Trump may give a grace period before, which would give more time for negotiations with Canadian and Mexican officials.
Richard, Trump is already threatening more countries with tariffs. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he's targeting the so-called BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that he would slap 100% tariffs if they find an alternative currency to use against the U.S. dollar for global trade. Trump posting, say goodbye to selling into the wonderful U.S. economy. He's accusing those countries as being hostile.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Janice McGregor is also covering the story from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, those cabinet ministers in Washington right now, what kind of conversations do we expect them to be having?
John, we could invest a lot of energy trying to parse Donald Trump's musings and the conflicting media reports about disagreements inside his administration on tariff policy, but that could also be a total waste of time. And what is actually implemented could be something totally different. So, in the meantime, an anxious weekend of waiting, watching, and briefing is ahead as preparations continue for a range of possibilities. Fresh off her meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said the facts that Canada's been trying to put in front of as many Republican leaders and influencers as possible have been resonating.
I think that we have a good strategy. And we are willing to make sure that this is a win-win partnership. And in that sense, we are making sure also that at the officials level, so at the RCMP level, at the CBSA level, we're making the contacts to clearly show what we're doing.
The question is whether this is going to be about Canada's substance or its style. Knowing that Trump's a TV guy, Canada's prepared action videos to show how it's beefing up the border. A Fox News reporter was live at the crossing in Coutts, Alberta yesterday, profiling the fight to crack down on illegal crossings. But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has also called on the federal government to appoint a border czar. Now, that's the same title Americans use. It makes it seem like Canada's lacking, doesn't have someone in charge. The Trudeau government says it does have a border czar. That's Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, who will be meeting with his American counterpart Tom Homan today. We'll see if Smith's criticism undermines what Trudeau's ministers are trying to accomplish in Washington.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney is expected to announce his plan to abandon the Liberal government's consumer carbon pricing this morning. In a statement ahead of that, Carney says the existing policy is divisive. Carney says he intends to keep industrial pricing in place, as his fellow leadership contender Chrystia Freeland has also pledged. Investigators in Washington are examining the so-called black boxes from the American Airlines flight that plunged into the Potomac River following the mid-air collision with a military helicopter on Wednesday night. Authorities say it is too soon to determine the cause, but a preliminary report is expected in 30 days. The CBC's Caroline Bargut is in Washington with the latest.
The National Transportation Safety Board says the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from the American Airlines flight are in a lab for evaluation. 67 people died, including more than a dozen figure skaters, after a Black Hawk helicopter crashed into the plane Wednesday night as the flight was preparing to land at Reagan Airport. The military helicopter was on a night training exercise at the time. Yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump suggested the air traffic controller could be to blame, and then said diversity, equity, and inclusion policies implemented by the Democrats played a role. Washington is known for having a very busy airspace. According to a report by the Federal Aviation Administration, the air traffic controller was working two positions at the time, responsible for handling both helicopter traffic and airplanes, which was not normal for that time of day and volume of air traffic, but still acceptable under FAA safety standards. The Washington Post is reporting the day before another plane had to abort a landing at the same airport to avoid a crash with a helicopter. Investigators say it's too early to know if human error or mechanical failure led to the crash. Canada's Transport Safety Board is assisting in the investigation since the Bombardier jetliner was built in Canada. But it likely will be months before we know what caused the deadly crash. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Washington.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for 2,500 children to be evacuated from Gaza for medical treatment. It comes as Israel's ban on UNRWA, the UN's main relief agency in Gaza, comes into effect. Critics of that decision are warning it will have a catastrophic impact. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
More than 400,000 Palestinians have returned to northern Gaza, hoping to find something. Nothing left, says Bilal Naim. All the water wells are destroyed and food is hard to find, he says. No hospitals either. Aid delivery into Gaza has increased by hundreds of trucks every day since the ceasefire began. But that's now threatened, as the main UN agency coordinating aid, UNRWA, has been banned from Israel. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says it's not clear if Israel will now try to stop shipments.
The humanitarian operations in Gaza continues, including with UNRWA work there.
The UN is also calling for urgent medical evacuations for 2,500 children, saying they are at risk of imminent death. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And finally, an unsolved mystery solved. An American murderer who evaded authorities in Missouri and Mexico hid for decades in a small Alberta town. Police say they've now closed the case on one of America's most wanted, a woman described by police for her pistol-packing ways. The CBC's Megan Grant has the details.
It all began unraveling with an anonymous tip, leading police to solve a 1960s cold case, but only after Sharon Kinney's death.
It's unfortunate we couldn't catch her when she was alive. She was really good at what she did. She hid really well.
Jackson County Sergeant Dustin Love speaking Thursday in Kansas City, announcing the end of the decades-old mystery. Fugitive Sharon Kinney had been hiding in southern Alberta under the name Dee Glabus. Glabus died in 2022 at the age of 81 in Tabor, a sleepy prairie town better known for its corn crop than crime stats. Kinney's former friends and neighbors are flabbergasted.
Well, it's amazing because it goes to show you that you don't really know people.
To me, it seems like it's impossible. How can you fool the whole world?
The women say Glavis was known as a bridge-playing, banana bread baking volunteer and realtor. She moved to Tabor in 1973 with her new husband and a secret. Police say Kinney fatally shot 3 people in the 60s. Her first husband, then her new lover's wife, both killed within 3 months of each other. While awaiting trial, she fled to Mexico City. Within days, she'd murdered a man in a botched robbery. In 1969, 5 years into her 13-year sentence, Kinney escaped from Mexican prison, evading police until that anonymous tip, prompting authorities this week to close their cold case. Megan Grant, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, you can listen to us live every morning on the CBC News app. Just tap on the local icon. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. The return to the very cold this morning across Manitoba. I should say across southern Manitoba. It's been cold out north all week. Thanks for joining us. Minus 23 in Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. And this is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app or YouTube. Well, this hour on the program, we're going to take you up North Main, where a longtime florist, a business there, says they've racked up tens of thousands in damage from vandalism over recent years. She says claiming insurance now just isn't worth it. And she says she's finding it hard to find hope for that stretch of Main Street, which means a lot to her. She grew up with her father owning the business she now owns. She's been there for generations. So we'll hear that conversation just ahead of 8. In addition, there's a growing movement to help get kids off their phones and get outside. And now we're going to chat with a Winnipeg parent who's trying to do that. We're going to hear exactly what she's doing in our city to promote it. And we'll take you back to our CBC Town Hall at the U of M this week as we were learning about life as an international student. Got a story about the reality of the stress and the mental health pressures that come with being an international student, so stay tuned for that. This right now, today, you might have also heard on World Report, this month is 1 year since the federal government first announced the cap on international student study permits. So that interview with that student's coming up at 7:40. All right, lots still ahead. Right now, though, let's switch gears. Let's talk about headlines and developing stories with Heather Wells. Good morning.
Good morning. And we have a story about international students as well, with some post-secondary students wondering when the Manitoba government's going to make good on a promise to restore their health coverage. Universal coverage for international students was eliminated in 2018 by the former PC government. NDP leader Wab Kinew promised to restore it before being elected premier in 2023. 15 months later, that still has not happened. And a 2-year-old girl who was killed in Bloodvein last week is being remembered as a happy toddler. Her mother, or her grandmother, I should say, 56-year-old woman, is now charged with second-degree murder in her death. We'll hear that story and how the little girl's being remembered by her aunt coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
It's such a sad story. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's switch gears here to the weather. It is creaky cold.
Yeah, very cold this morning. Temperatures ranging from frigid in the northern part of the province to very chilly conditions down south. Extreme cold warning in place for northern Manitoba with that dangerous wind chill getting close to minus 50. But for Winnipeg, we are at minus 23 at this time. Clear conditions you're seeing outside. Expect these clear skies to stay with us for a while. However, the clouds will roll in later in the afternoon. It's going to be a chilly day, a high of minus 18 today. The wind chill this morning feels like minus 35. Frostbite is a risk, so protect yourself. Overview, we're seeing cold temperatures across board. The Red River Valley region seeing wind chills near minus 36. Westman region, similar conditions. It's around minus 38 in the Parkland region and in the Gimli area. And then we're going to see snow roll in overnight into tomorrow in the southern part of the province. However, the north will stay frigid with clear skies and dangerous wind chills. But Winnipeg, we are currently at minus 23.
Dress for it. Corey, the commute this morning?
Yeah, just one call we got on the listener line from Faith Fundal.
Hi, Faith.
Hey, Faith. Got a call. They said Portage and Sherbourne, the lights are flashing red in all directions, so treat it as a four-way stop. Wasn't too backed up yet. which is the operative word. So I imagine it'll get backed up fairly soon. That's really the only major issue I've heard of so far. But if you see something else going on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Sounds Christmassy, hey? You're wondering why we're playing it, probably? You're thinking, what's with you guys? It's the last day of January. Well, this goes back to a conversation that we had yesterday on the air and a letter that I received here at CBC Manitoba that got delivered right after the show. And here's what it says. We'll just leave this music rolling. It'll all make sense. Good morning, Marcy. My name's Darcy Duggan. I'm an avid listener of the morning show. And this morning, which was yesterday, you guys are talking about your hunt. This is my hunt for the Bob Watts Trio Jazz for Christmas CD. Bob Watts and my husband, Bruce Duggan, were great friends. Bruce was a producer of the CD, and if my memory's correct, they recorded this CD in 2010 at Holy Trinity Anglican Church, where our families went together for years. Bob and his family did relocate to Victoria, BC. And sadly, Bob passed away just recently at his home in Victoria just after Christmas, December 26th, 2024, from cancer. Aside from the CDs, a lot of Winnipeggers may have fond memories of the Bob Watts Trio from the countless times they performed at McNally Robinson on the weekends. Since we have extra copies of the original Jazz for Christmas CD around our house, I thought I'd give you a few to pass along as you see fit, in Bob's memory. Isn't that nice?
That's so sweet.
I know. So thank you so much, Darcy. I'll tell you what, there's 5 CDs here. Because my chat yesterday was about how I searched for this CD forever. This is the music I put on at home when I'm baking. It ushers in my season. I actually did end up finding one on eBay and buying it after years of searching. And then, of course, it's like one story on the radio and you sent me 5. So thank you for those. 2 of our colleagues here at CBC were like, please, I would love that. So I did gift those. And then we have a couple more. So if you like what you're listening to, why don't we give 2 of them away this morning? Abby and Corey, you are precluded from getting involved in this.
Okay.
Do you know why?
I'm the Christmas guy.
Look at
because
you.
I would want one.
No, it's because y'all diss me about my love of using CDs still.
I never dissed you. It's Corey.
Well, also, I'm
Corey
still a little salty because I spent at least, 15 minutes this morning trying to find a way to actually play this CD on the radio.
Yeah, we had a hard time figuring out. Can we still play a CD?
Yeah.
All right. So, Abby, do you want one?
Gift it to a listener.
All right. We're going to give 2 to the listener. Abby's being Christmas generous here. So prepare for next year. Just give us a call. And you can call in the win line. And that is 780-0893. 780. Am I giving the traffic line right now?
No, give the.
Do you want the traffic line?
3205. 3205.
All right, we'll do the listener line. 788-3205. That's what we'll do for these CDs. Just give us a call. Tell us why you'd like one, and in Bob's name, we'll get you a Christmas CD. Get you in the spirit next year. Well, up next on the show, if you are old enough to remember life before smartphones and the time of CDs, speaking of which, you might remember a time where these kinds of sounds were everywhere. These are kids, right? Playing in the street, climbing trees, playing tag, all with minimal adult supervision. Well, Winnipeg parent Kaylee Quinn is our next guest. She was one of those kids as well. She says she wants this for her kids too. And she's hoping to get her whole neighborhood on board. Kaylee sits on the parent advisory board of Laura Seacourt School in Winnipeg's Wolseley neighborhood. And she's here to tell us about a neighborhood initiative to get kids off their phones and out into the quote unquote real world. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
So let's zero in on the goal to help increase childhood independence. Why is that important to you?
Yeah, well, I think there's, been a loss of independence, of freedom, of outdoor playtime for children over the past few decades, and it's sad. It's a loss to not hear those sounds of kids playing in the neighborhood and having some freedom and having some opportunity to develop competence and skills and build some independence.
This idea, we're about to elaborate on what the idea is to get the kids in the real world, but it all started with a book, actually, that I understand you were reading at a book club. It's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. So tell me a little bit about this book club and also what Haidt says in the book.
Yeah, so our neighborhood, our street has we have a book club, and every couple months we choose a new book. And over the summer we had chosen this book by Jonathan Haidt. And really one of the main premises of this book is over the past 15 years since the introduction of smartphones, we've lost we've lost some really essential element in our childhoods. We have more phone-full childhoods and less playful childhoods. And so what he's encouraging parents to do is to lean into how we can make our children's childhoods more phone-free and playful.
So you were reading this book and all talking about it, and then I understand you brought it. You took it. The next step was you took it to a parent council meeting at Laura Secord, and you met the superintendent.
Well, so at the first parent council meeting of the year, the actually school administrator shared a summary of the book, and he mentioned that, this was required reading by all school administrators in the Winnipeg School Division, and so it had been required by the superintendent. So we had shared a summary of the book, and it just was a coincidence that our book club, which all contains members who are also parents, also of children at that school, so we had read it also over the summer, just coincidentally. And so it just was a perfect opportunity for us to discuss, well, what are some of the ways that we can implement Haidt's recommendations into our school and into our families and into our community.
Very cool. Okay, so that super is Matt Henderson. Now let's get to some of the solutions then that Haidt offers and what you're doing to implement some of these principles.
Sure. So Haidt's main premise is that this is a really challenging problem to solve, this idea of phone use in kids and screen use in kids, a really challenging problem to solve in isolation, but a really easy problem to solve in community. And so he really encourages parents to come together in community to look at how to limit and delay offering their children smartphones and social media access until our children are 16, how to encourage outdoor free playtime, how to encourage independence in our children, and how to really work together in community to solve this.
And you had a community meeting actually to talk about it on the 22nd of January with I think about 100 parents, 100 teachers and interested community members came. What kinds of ideas were discussed?
Yeah, it was a really wonderful event. So we had an opportunity to discuss what are our priorities for what we want to see changing in our school and in our community. And so increasing outdoor time for learning and for play during school was a huge one, decreasing some individual screen use in school, creating a free playgroup for after school for kids to participate in, making agreements to delay smartphone use and social media use for our kids, and then finding ways to foster independence and competence in our kids through opportunities like the Let Grow experience.
Can you explain the Let Grow initiative?
Yeah, so the Let Grow initiative is basically the premise is that schools can bring it in as a project, as a school project, and kids can choose a task that they have never done before. So something in the real world, like go take their dog for a walk, run an errand, make a meal, and the idea is they confer with their parents and they decide with their parents, but they do it without their parents.
Love that. Now you can share some a specific example that you did with your daughter, Kaylee, right? So what did you go for?
Well, she wanted to try making pancakes by herself, and it was messy, but really very fun. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to try running an errand in our community. We have a really supportive, lovely block, and the book club that we have is one example of that, where we can, we're all supporting one another in the parenting journey.
Yeah. So where did you send her? How old is she? What was the errand that she ran?
So she's 7, and with a friend, she went down the block and she bought a cookie.
Nice. So what did she feel like when she came back? Like that she did that on her own?
Oh, they were beaming with pride. I mean, there was partly the excitement of the cookie in hand, but yeah, they were so proud of themselves for having accomplished this. And they had a little bump in the road with the ATM machine or the debit machine not working well, but it all works out.
Well, it was her and a friend that went, right?
Yeah.
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 How did you prepare her before, giving her more freedoms, given that this was a new thing?
Yeah, so she comes with me to do similar tasks like that. She knows the route there. So she's practiced that kind of with me shadowing her, with me standing outside while she does it inside. So she's had that little bit of taste of freedom already, and then wanted to tackle it on her own, or with a friend.
Yeah. What would you say to people listening this morning that are still just really concerned about safety when they think about sending their kids out, even in community, or maybe doing something that they might, I don't know, maybe somebody might see cooking as even having some risk that they can't overcome? How would you reassure those parents?
Yeah, well, and this might be a neighborhood-specific, challenge too. So if you're worried about safety outdoors, then one of the reasons this is really cool to assign as a school project and encourage your school to take on is because it does cause a shift in the community. That that everyone in the community will start seeing kids taking on some more initiative and more independence, and that we might see them walking a block or two without a parent right there with them, and that it kind of can start shifting our community to supporting each other and looking out for each other instead of surveilling and policing one another.
I love that.
And that we're really looking to our kids for what is the next step that they're ready for. So maybe it's making the batter instead of cooking on the stove first. So that's, look to them as well for their readiness.
I know that our sports reporter is waiting for me, but I have to ask this question because you used language there. You said instead of surveilling each other and, reporting each other. What's meant by that?
So instead of, looking out the window and why is that child, walking on their own, and where is their parent, and perhaps calling an agency that might police that, right? But instead, maybe just checking in, and we know, oh, hey, I know whose child that is. And you can send them a text. Hey, where are they off to right now? Like, do you need me to help in any way? Or, even just going out and chatting with the kid if you're worried, but that we're really leaning into that support and encouraging one another.
I love that this is happening in your neighborhood. Good luck with the rest of it. We'll have to check in as it gets even more, you get more involved and summer comes. And thank you so much for being on with us this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me.
That is Kaylee Quinn. She's a parent who lives in Wolseley. She's also on Laura Secord's Parent Advisory Council. If you're listening from your neighborhood or your town or your city in Manitoba, and you have something similar, or you want to share with us about how maybe your parents are also trying to come together, families coming together to give the kids more freedoms and feel confident, give us a call, 788-3205. And now to sports with Brian Ray and talking about a good night for the Jets, right?
Yeah, it certainly was, Marcy. A dominant road win over the Bruins. 6-2 the final. So that's 5 wins in a row for the Jets. Mark Scheifele leading the way with a couple goals. Connor Hellebuck, 27 saves. It really a special night for Parker Ford. Got called up from the Moose to make his NHL debut. And Ford is from Rhode Island and went to college in Providence. So his debut comes just a short drive from Boston.
I told all of them that I got called up, and it was 50-50 if I was going to play or not, and told them I'd keep them posted. We all got tickets already, so if I was playing or not, they were coming, so kind of worked out that I did play. My whole life I've wanted to do this for my family. It's probably going to be emotional when I go see them here, but they've done so much, and I feel like I owe it to them to have a little bit of fun coming to these games. So it was awesome. I mean, I couldn't draw it up much better than this, honestly.
Talking about bringing his friends and family to the game. Jets are on the road tomorrow night against the Capitals. The Caps, by the way, lost to the Senators in overtime last night. Red Wings stopped the Oilers. The Flames beat the Ducks. And a memorable night for Marc-Andre Fleury in Montreal. His last game in his home province of Quebec. Fleury got the shutout for the Wild against the Canadiens. The former Vezina retiring at the end of the season. Really got a great ovation from Montreal. So a good night for him.
And also another win for Montreal in the PWHL.
Yeah, the Victoire coming out on top over the Scepters. 4-3 the final. That was decided in a shootout. Fourth win in a row for Montreal. A back-and-forth game. Laura Stacey's goal halfway through the third put Montreal ahead, but then Daryl Watts sent it to overtime with a goal a little over 3 minutes to play. Stacey playing a starring role for Montreal with 2 assists, also scoring in the shootout. So here's Coach Corey Chevery on using Stacey as the 13th forward in her return from injury.
Honestly, a lot of it is a feeling. It's where we think she can most have an impact, where we think she can provide a spark to the team, and she played on every single line in every single situation, and that was the plan going into it, that she could play anywhere, and it was exciting to have a player in the 13th spot who could do that.
Despite the result, the Scepters do pick up a point, so they move ahead of Boston into 5th, and they're at home against Ottawa tomorrow night. One game tonight in the PWHL. Boston hosts New York.
And in baseball, a big signing for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, not official yet, but all indications, multiple reports now saying that pitcher Max Scherzer is indeed heading to Toronto.
A swing and a miss. He strikes out Bobby Witt. First strikeout of the season for Max Scherzer.
The deal is reportedly 1 year and worth $15.5 million, so he's not coming cheap, but really not too many pitchers have that kind of a resume. 3-time Cy Young Award winner, 2-time World Series champion, most recently with the Rangers in 2023. Could be a little bit of a gamble. Scherzer is 40 years old, didn't play much last year, only pitched about 43 innings for the Rangers. He had off-season surgery to repair a disc in his back. That was the reason for him not playing. He did work out for a few teams recently and apparently looked good, so looks like he's going to be joining a starting rotation with names like Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, so looks like a pretty good pickup for Toronto. If they can get him, 20-25 games out of him, that would be pretty good. But yeah, just a couple weeks away now till players start to report in Dunedin, and 3 weeks away from the first game of spring training.
All right, thanks a lot, Brian. Have a great weekend.
You too. Have a good one.
That's Brian Ray. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. Wow. It's minus 23. How did that happen? We sank overnight, and we are going to remain cold today, a high of minus 18 with a risk of frostbite. But the good news is we warm up above normal tomorrow. International students hope Manitoba's government will soon keep a promise to restore their health coverage. The former Progressive Conservative government got rid of universal coverage for international students in 2018. NDP leader Wab Kinew promised to reinstate it before being elected premier in 2023, but 15 months later, students are still waiting. Aditya Gandhi is majoring in environmental studies at the University of Manitoba.
Things can take time, but it's disappointing as an international student for sure to almost have a false promise made.
The NDP government says it's reviewing how best to provide health care coverage to international students. A 2-year-old girl who was killed in Bloodvein last week is being remembered as a happy toddler. Roberta Goosehead says she raised her niece, Josiah Young, from birth. She says Josiah loved all kinds of music.
She loved to dance. Dancing was her thing. She would dance from anything from Zumba to jigging to pop dancing. She just loved the music.
Goosehead says she gave the child to her maternal grandmother in October because she couldn't manage having a job and a young child. RCMP say Josiah was taken to the nursing station in Bloodvein with serious injuries last Friday. Her 56-year-old grandmother is now charged with second-degree murder. The head of the Canadian Association of Journalists applauds a City News reporter for taking up a court fight on his own to keep one of his interviews out of the hands of Winnipeg police. Detectives got a production order for a copy of Morgan Majeski's interview with the father of a man accused in a mass shooting. Police say it's relevant to their investigation because the man wouldn't give them a full statement. CAJ President Brent Jolly worries about the outcome of the case and says journalists cannot be seen as an investigative arm of the police.
That has a material and considerable impact on, the independence
of journalism to do its job in a democracy, but also to deter people from coming forward to speak to journalists.
Majeski's employer, Rogers Media, is allowing Majeski to challenge this order. No date for a decision has been given. Winnipeg City Council has slapped Russ Wyatt with a public reprimand. The Transcona councillor came under fire in 2023. He publicly suggested Winnipeg's chief administrative officer should be fired over a multi-million-dollar court judgment that went against the city. A report by an outside integrity commissioner said Wyatt should be made to apologize for his comments. He was given one last chance at last night's council meeting, but refused, saying it would send a terrible message.
There's no accountability, it seems, inside the city of Winnipeg when it comes to being found liable in a court for malfeasance. You could have a $5 million award against the very employer that you're working for because of your actions, and there are no consequences, no accountability, no transparency.
The vote to reprimand Wyatt was 12-2. Councillors Jason Schreier and Sherry Rowlands were the only dissenters. Brandon grade 8 student Eric Cerqueira says he has friends who come to school hungry. To help them, Cerqueira is volunteering with Harvest Manitoba's Meals to Go program. Meals to Go made its first delivery to his school yesterday. It will now be in Brandon every week, making sure students have healthy food to take home on the weekend. The King George School student says helping carry in the food boxes was hard work, but worth it.
A lot of good stuff, and it was helping kids that didn't have breakfast, and I wanted to be in it and help because it's a good thing for all of us.
Meals to Go will be at Betty Gibson and King George schools every Friday. Along with Brandon, the program recently expanded to Opaskwayak at Cree Nation. Meal kits include fresh dairy products, fruit, veggies, and other snacks. And a sharpshooter.
Shifley scores! How about that for an answer? Shifley with his 30th, and again, the Jets are in the lead. 31st for Shifley.
Mark Scheifele on TSN there as the Winnipeg Jets beat the Bruins in Beantown. 6-2 the final. It's Winnipeg's 5th win in a row and Mark Scheifele's 31st of the season, tying Ilya Kovalchuk with his 328th career goal, joining Kovalchuk atop the Jets Thrashers all-time goal list. And Scheifele says that is humbling.
Huge honor. Obviously very, very special. And obviously he was a fantastic player. And like I've said before, I play with some pretty fantastic players that set me up in those positions. So, it all goes to them.
Next up, Winnipeg's in Washington in a battle of the NHL's top 2 teams. The Jets are 1 point ahead of the Capitals. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news department this morning. Well, congratulations to our CD winners. I was mentioning this Bob Watts trio, the CD I searched for ages, finally ordered it on eBay, and as soon as I said that on the air yesterday, someone sent me 5 of them. And so we have 3 winners this morning for these CDs, because 2 were already given away. Cynthia, Susan, and Brian. Enjoy it. It's beautiful jazz, holiday music. And now I know why I probably had that CD, because I was like, Bob Watts is from Victoria, but he's originally from Winnipeg, and you might have seen him play here. All right, let's get into this frigid forecast with Abby Adiyemi.
Let's look at the regions. Winnipeg at this time, -23. It is cold outside. Expect some clouds to roll in later in the day. It's going to stay very cold. Our high would be around -18 this morning. However, the wind chill feels like -35 as you start your day, though it improves during the lunch period. And then tomorrow, we have our snow from overnight that would roll into tomorrow. In the Pembina Valley region, we're seeing similar conditions, -21 in Morden. Partly cloudy skies we're seeing. It's also going to be a chilly day there. Wind chill around -34. Brandon sitting at -22. Cloudy conditions. Expect a chilly day. The wind chill is going to make you feel colder, around -35. And for your high, it's going to be similar to Winnipeg. In the Parkland region, -29 in Dauphin. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. Highs around -19. Gimli, -27. Heading to a high of -19. The wind chill also close to -35. In the Power Flin Flon, we're seeing temperatures around -37 in both towns. Clear conditions you're seeing. Expect plenty of sunshine in the forecast. forecast, though that's not going to warm things up because the wind chill this morning will be feeling like minus 40 for folks in that part of the province. Up north in Thompson, minus 32 and clear. I expect a sunny day, highs around minus 23. Wind chill this morning feels like minus 43. And then you travel farther north where we have ice crystals and Churchill, temperatures around minus 28. Expect a mix of sun and clouds today. Temperatures will drop into around minus 28 later. But the wind chill feels like minus 45 in that part of the province. So expect a cold day across the province. And the wind chill getting to close to minus 40s down south and close to minus 50 up north.
Yep. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
All right. The commute, Corey?
The only issue this morning I've heard of is Portage and Sherbourne. Faith Fundal called the commuter line and said the traffic signals are flashing red in all directions. It appears to still be a problem. Might be some backups there. But other than that, if you see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, next in the show, as you may have heard on World Report earlier this morning, it was 1 year ago this month that the federal government first announced a cap on international student study permits. And that is just one of the issues that adds uncertainty to the lives of those students and to the institutions where they attend. Next, let's take you back to the University of Manitoba to hear more from those who took part in our CBC Town Hall this week, which was all about the issues facing international students, specifically the more than 6,500 international students from more than 120 different countries who study at the University of Manitoba. Now, Barris Tafis is one of those students. Barris, who's from Turkey, hopes to become a doctor one day. In the meantime, though, he says he faces a never-ending crash course in managing the pressure that comes with being an international student. Here is my conversation with him. So you arrived here in 2022, as you said, it's your third year. What were some of the biggest financial shocks? I understand how far your money went was a real shock in Canada.
Oh yeah, I came to Winnipeg in 2022, but I actually came to Canada way before that. During COVID times, I did my last year of high school here in Vancouver. And when I first came here, the conversion rate between the Canadian dollar and the Turkish lira was 1 to 4 or 1 to 3.5, something like that. Right now it's 1 to 25, so that's a big shock.
Wow. So that's just in a couple of years. You've had to see what your currency change that much.
Oh yeah, that was a big jump, and my parents were thinking like, now what?
Yeah.
Now what are we going to do?
How much more is it for you as an international student to pay for a course, for example, compared to a student that would be here applying from within Canada?
Great question. Although I'm not sure about the exact rates, I can give you an estimation. I believe a Canadian student pays around 500 per course, and for international student, that number is 2,200, excluding lab fees.
What's a lab fee?
Some courses came with a lab component, and you have to pay around like 300 more.
Okay. What is all of that like? Like, how has all this impacted your life? You talked about your currency, and then now you have these costs that are obviously very high. How stressful is that?
It is pretty stressful since I have like 6 more years to study before I actually get my salary. And every term I'm trying to like take as many courses as possible so I don't have to pay for, more years. And it's a big toll on my mother because I lost my father when I was 2. So it's just, don't worry about it. So it's just my single mother trying to work 2 shifts. Like, she's a doctor too, but also doing like some side jobs. Just try to make me a doctor as well.
What's the pressure of maintaining grades like for an international student? And what happens if you're struggling with maintaining grades? What's the impact?
The impact is Canadian medical schools are pretty competitive, especially when it comes to grades. So for me, everything has to be either an A or an A+. And thinking I'm taking 5 classes each term, that's a big toll. I'm doing like part-time jobs. It's just like time is not working for me.
Yeah.
Just remaining time for my friends, sometimes like just 2 hours, then I have to tell them, hey, I have to go back. Either I have a shift or I have to go back to studying. Otherwise, it's not working.
And if you drop a course, what happens? Like, you have to maintain a certain course load to maintain your status as a student, right?
Yes. I believe you need 9 credit hours, which is around 3 courses. And if you drop one, it's against your study permit, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah. How do you handle all of that pressure then? Where do you find support?
I'm glad I found the lab here, which consists of few Turkish students and like few international students as well. They're my go-to support group. I spend most of my days with them, and after the lab, doing some experiments, we just like head to their place, hang out a little bit. Then I go back to studying or sleeping. I can say like just thinking about my mother, what she's putting, and thinking about my friends, their support on me. I have to push through.
In terms of the costs, what do you have to really make sure then, like, I mean, I'm just thinking about the costs you would have. Like, you're obviously going to have living costs. You're going to have costs for food. You're going to have costs for your life. Where do you cut back to be able to keep pushing with your studies?
I remember there was one time I asked my mother, hey, can I get a cabbage? Is it okay? She was like, yeah, like, don't ask that. Sometimes I just like hang out with my friends. They know, like, sometimes get coffee. I don't want to say like I'm not a privileged person. I am a very privileged person compared to a normal Turkish citizen. I'm here in Canada studying abroad, paying thousands. That's a privilege, but still I have to think about my mother. I have to cut back on few things. I don't live in an apartment or anything like that. I'm also in a shared room, shared house. I have my own room. Yeah. Something like that. Always try to chase deals on food. Just cut back where necessary.
How does the experience compare to what you thought it would be when you were like in Turkey and dreaming of applying to medicine and studying here in Canada?
I knew it was going to be hard, but there are sometimes unexpected events. I can always think about dollar value changing again, right? So there was a big jump. No one expected that. What happens like from 25 to, let's say, 40 this time? One more jump. I don't think we can afford that, right?
I understand, in the week of your finals, you actually told your mom not to call you.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Like during finals week, it's 5-course load. Sometimes I get really anxious and I don't want to scare my mom like that, because I know if I get scared, and she can feel it, right? If I give her that energy, she will be thinking about me for the whole month. So I just give her, this week I have my exams. Let's not call each other.
So that's your poker face.
Oh yeah. Sometimes, like, if you cannot hold the face, you just have to drop the phone.
What I mean, some of this is going to be exploring, as I said, challenges and also successes, because we appreciate there's lots that is done to try and support students. But if you could add a support that would make your life easier, obviously you said you're not going to be able to change what currency does, but what do you wish that you had here as a student?
As a student, one thing I would really wish was the academic rewards. We had some academic rewards like the undergraduate research awards, which given to certain students for the summer term. You get paid, I don't remember the exact value, but you pay some money to work under a lab. But there are some rewards that are only for Canadian students only, so we are excluded from them. I wish we had more opportunities to at least exchange your suffering and studying for monetary purposes.
So that recognition, if you are achieving, if it will be rewarded in a monetary way, and you're saying there's some kind of a difference between what international students would receive and Canadian students.
Exactly.
That would be
nice.
Beneficial. Yeah.
That's my conversation with Baris Tavis, an international student from Turkey. He's now in his third year of studies at the University of Manitoba. For more from our CBC Town Hall event that we had live at the U of M earlier this week, please go to our CBC Manitoba YouTube page, because there were so many interesting and informative conversations there. And of course, we'll be building on those in the weeks ahead.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself, because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
It is 7:47 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. We've got a really interesting half hour ahead after 8 o'clock on the show today. So we are going to be meeting a woman in Brandon who's looking at everything she buys to make sure it's made in Canada. So you might have heard this in the news, but we have a full report on it from Rosanna Hempel. And then we're also going to be hearing from a Manitoba business owner who says he's concerned about what a trade war with the U.S., a trade war with the U.S. Could mean for how much you might pay for a cup of Morning Joe. cup of coffee. So stay tuned. We're going to hear all about that. That's after 8. Right now, speaking of businesses, when you drive down Main Street and then you are going north and you're north of Higgins, and you might notice that things start to change very quickly. There's so many buildings that are boarded up. There's windows boarded up. There's graffiti on the walls. There's spaces that have, been left empty. Often these buildings can be separated as well by vacant lots or even burned out buildings. Most recently, of course, you reported on the Sutherland Hotel that burnt to the ground. I should say burnt and then was demolished to the ground. But all of this has a huge impact on people who live in that part of Winnipeg. But obviously, a lot of them also are business owners. We're about to meet someone who is both of those things. CBC's Corey Funk. Corey, recently went to one of those businesses yesterday to talk to someone about how she's holding up. And this is a really interesting interview in the context of a whole bunch of civic issues, Corey. So where were you?
Yeah, so I went to Cosmopolitan Florist. It's on Main Street between Pritchard and Magnus there, just a few blocks north of where the Sutherland Hotel used to be. It's owned by Astrid Lichty, who's actually run it for 41 years. Her family opened it in 1966. And in recent years, she faced a huge vandalism problem, so much so that it doesn't even make sense for her to make insurance claims anymore. So when I went there yesterday, the first thing I noticed was that she keeps the door locked at all times. That's new. Her partner actually waits by the door and unlocks it for everyone who wants to come in. But once you're in, it's like this kind of beautiful little colorful oasis. It smells great in there too, as you can imagine. She's also got a Rottweiler in the shop named Leonidas. He's a total sweetie pie. And she says she actually adopted him out of love, but it doesn't hurt to have him around for security purposes. I chatted with her in her shop and she told me about the most recent vandalism her business has seen.
Somebody with a gallon of accelerant threw it through our chain link fence and set our doghouse on fire. That was about a month ago, approximately 2 weeks ago. For the 8th time, cut through our fence in the back of the compound, went into the business improvement zone shed by taking bolt cutters and snapped the lock off. And that's happened 8 times in 2 years.
How much damage would you say has been done to your property through things like events like that? That you've kind of racked up?
Well, I stopped counting when it got to about 70,000.
And I understand you actually haven't bothered to file an insurance claims. Why is that?
Nobody would file an insurance claim. What happens when you do file an insurance claim is you pay not only the deductible, and glass break could be between $1,000 and $1,500 deductible of pain, but you pay an extra cost for the next year's insurance because you're not claims free, and it accelerates. If you look at the business improvement zone, North End Biz, from Higgins Avenue to St. John's Park, look at all the gaps. Look at all the burnt out properties. The latest one is the Sutherland Hotel. All that goes to the R2W postal code when people are quoting you for insurance. Now, you can't necessarily be denied residential insurance. To my knowledge, I think the government underwrites that, but you can be denied commercial insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, we had probably 24 incidences in 5 years. I wouldn't get insurance anywhere.
And are you hearing that from other businesses in the area too?
Absolutely.
What do you want to see done to make things safer for you and just for the people in your neighborhood?
About 25 years ago, with the arsons that were happening in the spate of the North End, hundreds of thousands of dollars went into programs such as the COPP program through MPIC and other foot patrol programs working with Winnipeg Police. There was a special arson squad. MPIC had a special stolen automobile squad, and we had patrol officers. And also police and schools. So it was a multi-pronged approach, all the way from federal funding to provincial funding and some civic funding and partnerships. And it really made a dent. It made a difference. That's the approach that needs to be here now. I tried to explain also that we're at an over 40% vacancy rate from 10 years ago from businesses in this area. And when you look at prospective investment, they're not going to come and invest when they're seeing boarded up properties, graffiti, broken windows, broken doors, unsecured buildings, burnt out buildings, empty lots, and there has been no interest. I've been tracking this for the biz for over 5 years, and I've spoken to some commercial real estate agents, and they say when they bring prospective customers here. They do the drive-bys, they look, they do some, I guess some research. If I purchased that commercial property or bought that commercial business, what's the insurance? And then they go, no. And that's one of the issues. The other is attracting and retaining your staff. Most of the people have locked door policies here now, and it's for a reason. And that is the same as attracting and retaining your customers. If they don't feel safe parking their car and coming into your establishment and leaving and going back to their car.
And in terms of just your concerns as a business owner, in terms of attract people, wanting to come here to buy flowers, things like that, have you noticed a difference in terms of the safety and how does it repel customers, or have you noticed a change?
It absolutely repels customers. What we used to have is, you had nice days or sunny days, and people would just go for a walk. Even from the businesses here, like the banks or financial institutions, they'd go for a walk, go to the restaurant, walk 2 blocks, come pop in the flower shop. There's none of that now. I mean, we had 4 financial institutions, 3 major banks and a credit union. Access is the last to pull out. We don't have a single financial institution in our business improvement zone. Think about that. All the way from Portage and Maine till you get to Inkster, there is no financial institution. As far as the vandalism is concerned, the broken windows, I mean, one pane got busted 3 times in 5 weeks. And it's $4,500 a pane.
I imagine for any business in the area, you can just incur. So what does that mean?
You keep a certain contingency in case the boiler needs to be repaired, or things go right, but certainly not to that value. My staff needs to be paid. My wholesalers need to be paid. My property taxes need to be paid. My utilities. Guess who doesn't get paid? The owner. Sometimes it's months on end when you have these large reparation projects.
So what does this mean for the future of your business?
Well, I've had customers in the last 10 years or so ask me, would you consider moving? And the answer is no. I mean, I grew up in this business. There was no daycare in the 60s. Business people who had kids, your kids were schlepped there, and that's where you were. And you were there, on the summer times, you were there after school, you were there before school, you were there on the weekends. So I have a great, great tie to this area and to these buildings. And for me, it's an emotional hurdle to get over, and I'm not there yet.
Are you hopeful that that this area will ever make a comeback?
Well, one of the things that I was, I guess, a little bit hopeful towards or optimistic was with the influx of the Ukrainian people, specifically because of 935 Main Street, which is the Ukrainian National Federation, and they were running a whack of programming out of there, and maybe interest in purchasing vacant properties or building or starting a business, but there was nothing really came of it. Because of the state of the area. So it's a detriment.
So hope is hard to come by?
I'd say hope is at the end of the string and hanging on. That's what I'd say. And I think there needs to be younger generation of entrepreneurs, but so much is online now that bricks and mortar businesses are suffering everywhere, right? Maybe it should be with the Housing Accelerator Fund, where they make it a mandate that the empty lots become 3 or 4 story residential housing units. Why not? Why is it going everywhere but here? We have lots of empty lots. We have very old, but perhaps can be rehabilitated solid buildings. Those are things to consider too.
That's Astrid Lichty, and Corey talked to her yesterday, the owner of Cosmopolitan Florist on North Main, at her shop down there. She's been, she grew up in that business, as she said. She's run it, her family, for 41 years, or she's run it for 41 years, her family beyond that. So we actually are interested in hearing more from that part of Winnipeg. Astrid's right. We're talking about solutions and housing and needs and all these things fitting together. And then we have the problems with fires and vandalism and social pressures. And we also are on the cusp of sort of the new coordinated plans and funding with the city and the province, right, coming out with those big plans. So if you live in that part of Winnipeg, and you're listening, if you're on that part of Main Street or those adjacent streets in that part of Point Douglas, we would really love to hear from you, because we're working sort of on a series of different stories. So call our listener line, 788-3205, 788-3205, if anything resonated in that conversation with Astrid, or if you have a story pitch for us about how you see what solutions might revitalize and also serve the community in that part of North Main. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for being with us here on CBC. Let's go to our news headlines now at 8:03 with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a 2-year-old girl who was killed in Bloodvein last week is being remembered as a happy toddler. Roberta Goosehead says she raised her niece, Josiah Young, from birth. She says she gave the child to her maternal grandmother in October because she couldn't manage having a job and a young child. Her 56-year-old grandmother is now charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg journalist is fighting to keep an interview out of the hands of police. City News reporter Morgan Majewski is challenging a production order obtained by detectives for a copy of an interview with the father of a man accused in a mass shooting. Majewski's lawyer says it's critical journalists maintain credibility, impartiality, and distance from police. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, you might be enjoying your morning cup of coffee right now. We're going to hear from a Manitoba business owner after 8 who's worried about what a trade war with the U.S. could mean for how much you pay for your cup of morning Joe. So that story is coming up. Of course, tomorrow's that February 1st deadline that Donald Trump imposed, said that he may talk tariffs and confirm that 25% is coming on Canada tomorrow, February 1st. In addition, staying with that story, if you've been thinking in the context of all this about trying to put more Canadian goods in your shopping cart, you're not alone. We're going to hear from a woman after 8 who lives in Brandon. She says she's reading every label in an effort to keep her money in Canada. It's cold out there this morning, just really frigid. Lots of exhaust fog and icy conditions. It's minus 23, and with wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 35. Our high's only minus 18. Stay warm. We'll be back after World Report at 8.
On Q with Tom Power.
The show The Sex Lives of College Girls is being called this generation's Sex and the City, and it stars a Canadian, Umrit Kaur.
I realized that I think I was trying to use you as a way of getting over someone else.
She'll be here to tell you how she got plucked out of Markham, Ontario to be in this massive show, and how acting has helped her confront her insecurities. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Vandals across the country have been smashing speed trap cameras. This is a technology that brings out some big feelings in people. Some advocates say the cameras do make streets safer. Others say we need to rethink our roads more broadly. We'll talk about that coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
That's coming on the 1st, Saturday. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico.
Oval Office remarks from Donald Trump confirm what's causing a lot of concern in this country. And with the clock ticking down, some of the most senior members of the Liberal government are in Washington, part of last-minute efforts ahead of that deadline. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, and Immigration Minister Mark Miller leading efforts south of the border. On this side of the border, the Prime Minister is chairing a meeting of the Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. But Donald Trump seems determined to go ahead with it all. That's where we begin our coverage. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. Richard, what is the latest from the U.S. President on tariffs?
Yeah, President Trump insists his punishing tariffs will take effect this weekend, but is now signaling Canadian-made oil imports may be exempt. Take a listen.
Those tariffs may or may not rise with time. Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
Now, Trump also said he hasn't made a final decision, but 25% tariffs on Canadian oil would likely drive up gas prices on Americans. Canadian officials have been frantically lobbying the administration to reverse course, laying out the damage it would have on both economies and the supply chain. But Trump is using the threat of tariffs as a weapon to enact his domestic agenda. He's demanding his neighbors Mexico and Canada take more action to stop migration and drug flow into the U.S., or else he'd slap 25% tariffs. His nominee for Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said the tariffs will be implemented in phases. And White House officials are telling the Wall Street Journal that Trump may give a grace period before, which would give more time for negotiations with Canadian and Mexican officials.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Janice McGregor is also covering the story from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, those cabinet ministers in Washington right now, what kind of conversations do we expect them to be having?
John, an anxious weekend of waiting, watching, and briefing is ahead as preparations continue for a range of possibilities. Fresh off her meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly said the facts that Canada's been trying to put in front of as many Republican leaders and influencers as possible have been resonating.
I think that we have a good strategy, and we are willing to make sure that this is a win-win partnership. And in that sense, we are making sure also that at the officials level, so at the RCMP level, at the CBSA level, we're making the contacts to clearly show what we're doing.
The question is whether this is going to be about Canada's substance or its style. Knowing that Trump's a TV guy, Canada's prepared action videos to show how it's beefing up the border. A Fox News reporter was live at the crossing in Coutts, Alberta yesterday, profiling the fight to crack down on illegal crossings. But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has also called on the federal government to appoint a border czar. Now, that's the same title Americans use. It makes it seem like Canada's lacking, doesn't have someone in charge. The Trudeau government says it does have a border czar. That's Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, who will be meeting with his American counterpart Tom Homan today. We'll see if Smith's criticism undermines what Trudeau's ministers are trying to accomplish in Washington.
Well, Janice, what else could be done as the clock is ticking down?
On the Quebec stretch of the border, officials were out this week showing off the Black Hawk helicopter that they've now repurposed to police illegal activity from the sky. CBC News went for a ride-along with an RCMP officer on border patrol as part of the beefed-up presence on the ground. Minister McGuinty also announced the launch of a new regulatory oversight process for the precursor chemicals used to produce synthetic opioids like fentanyl. One of the issues he's going to be discussing with Homan today, standing up a joint North American strike force that will target organized crime, including the cartels that traffic in fentanyl.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney is expected to announce his plan to abandon the Liberal government's consumer carbon pricing this morning. In a statement ahead of that, Carney says the existing policy is divisive. Carney says he intends to keep industrial pricing in place, as his fellow leadership contender Chrystia Freeland has also pledged. Investigators now have the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder from the airliner involved in Wednesday night's mid-air collision in Washington. There are no survivors among the 67 people on board the two aircraft. Paul Hunter has the latest.
Even as divers continue their work in the icy, shallow waters of the Potomac, sifting through the wreckage of the two aircraft, investigators are already able to begin examining what's been recovered so far, including the cockpit voice recorder and data recorder from the passenger jet, the so-called black boxes. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, which heads the investigation, expects to issue a preliminary report within 30 days. It'll be supported in part by Canada's Transportation Safety Board because, though the plane was operated by American Airlines, the Bombardier jetliner was built in Canada in 2004. It's to be reconstructed piece by broken piece in an NTSB hangar once the recovery is complete to aid investigators in their efforts. Says the NTSB, for now, everything's on the table from mechanical to human error, though U.S. President Donald Trump, without offering any evidence, has suggested diversity hiring policies at the Federal Aviation Authority put in place by the Biden and Obama administrations are to blame. A suggestion slammed by some as racist and despicable. Trump's new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, said the mid-air collision should not have happened and pledged changes to ensure, quote, these mistakes do not happen again and again. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for 2,500 children to be evacuated from Gaza for medical treatment. It comes as Israel's ban on UNRWA, the UN's main relief agency in Gaza, comes into effect. Critics of that decision are warning it will have a catastrophic impact. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more from Jerusalem.
More than 400,000 Palestinians have returned to northern Gaza, hoping to find something. Nothing left, says Bilal Naim. All the water wells are destroyed and food is hard to find, he says. No hospitals either. Aid delivery into Gaza has increased by hundreds of trucks every day since the ceasefire began. but that's now threatened as the main UN agency coordinating aid, UNRWA, has been banned from Israel. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says it's not clear if Israel will now try to stop shipments.
The humanitarian operations in Gaza continues, including with UNRWA work there.
The UN is also calling for urgent medical evacuations for 2,500 children, saying they are at risk of imminent death. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And finally, it's been a year since the Trudeau government announced caps on international student permits. The decision has generated a severe cash crunch for Canadian colleges, with many slashing their programs. Our senior education reporter, Deanna Sumanek-Johnson, has more.
Students were shocked. I'm pretty sure the college officials were shocked.
Vivian Eke has dreamt of being a 3D animator for years, so learning her program at Centennial College will be cancelled along with 48 others was a shock. Eke, who is in her final year, will still be able to graduate, but as a student union rep, she's hearing from others who aren't as lucky. Cuts to individual courses might also delay some students' graduations.
There are some students that maybe they failed a course, maybe in their first semester, and they're like, oh, I'll take it in my last semester. But maybe by the time they're done, they might, there's not going to be any new intakes, so they might not have the opportunity to take that course again.
For many colleges, federal caps on international student enrollments have necessitated cuts to courses, programs, and staff. Cuts that have been coming fast and furious in the new year. Colleges were particularly hard hit, especially in Ontario, where analysts say more than 70% of Canada's international students reside. St. Lawrence College also announced cuts to more than 50 programs just this week. President Glenn Volbragt says not only students are affected, but all those local workplaces that were counting on St. Lawrence grads as workforce.
St. Lawrence College serves Eastern Ontario, right? It will hit our local communities. And that pains me because colleges are set up to serve local labor market needs.
And as bad as all that sounds, experts say the cuts are nowhere near done as Canada's post-secondary sector contends with a lean new reality. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Well, it's freezing out there this morning. Hopefully you stayed safe overnight, and hopefully your car started this morning. And if you're at the bus stop, you are wrapped in layers today. That's the view from downtown Winnipeg, at least, and across the province, it's frigid. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube across Manitoba. Well, this half hour on the show, maybe you're warming up with a good cup of coffee today. The question is, if Canada and the U.S. do get into a trade war and things change tomorrow with 25% tariffs, would you be willing to pay more for your morning cup of Java? According to one Winnipeg coffee importer, that could happen. We're going to hear from him how this may affect his business. Also, if you are thinking of doing your part to buy Canadian, how much work would that take? We're going to hear from a woman in Brandon who's looking at everything she buys to make sure it's made in Canada. We have that report from Rosanna Hempel. Stay tuned. With updates and headlines and other stories, here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. International students hope Manitoba's government will soon keep a promise to restore their health coverage. The former PC government got rid of universal coverage for international students in 2018. NDP leader Wab Kinew promised to reinstate it before being elected premier in 2023, but 15 months later, students are still waiting. Winnipeg City Council has slapped Russ Wyatt with a public reprimand. The Transcona councillor came under fire for comments suggesting that Winnipeg CAO should be fired over a multi-million-dollar court judgment. A report by an integrity commission said Wyatt should be made to apologize. He was given that chance last night, but refused. We'll hear why he won't say sorry in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
With a look at Winnipeg weather today, here's Abby.
Winnipeg, Brandon, looking at temperatures around minus 25. Wind chill feels like minus 35 this morning. And Dauphin all the way to the Interlake region, seeing temperatures in the minus 30s already. We do see a high of minus 18 today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey, the commute.
Yeah, it's such a Century and Silver. There's a stalled vehicle that's northbound Century at Silver in the far right-hand lane, so keep left to get around. That may cause some backups for folks. As well, lights are out, or they're flashing red, at Portage and Sherbourne all morning. That's been a problem. Treat that as a four-way stop may also be causing delays. Poor visibility in northern Manitoba today around Thompson, Lynn Lake, The Pas, Grand Rapids, so be careful around there. If you see anything else going on, though, 204-788-3093.
Well, for many of us all around the world, waking up with a morning cup of coffee is part of the routine. But did you know there's a good chance that the beans you used to make your coffee this morning stopped in the U.S. on their way to Canada? Now, one result of a trade war with the U.S. could be a spike in the price of coffee in Canada. CBC's Jim Agapito spoke to a Winnipeg coffee roaster in Winnipeg's North End about how he acquires his green coffee beans and how tariffs, if they go in place tomorrow or announced tomorrow, could impact his business.
And Brazil has challenges with. Hi, I'm Travis Boyd from Black Pearl Coffee Roaster, Winnipeg. So what we do is we import and roast specialty, fair trade, and organic coffee. Well, for me, it's a legal addictive substance in the north end of Winnipeg, and right there is a bonus to it, okay? So for over 24 years, we've experienced a lot of it. But coffee has a long lineage. It's an adult beverage. It is access to being an adult. It's one of the most recognizable smells in the world. It's the second largest traded commodity next to sugar. So coffee is a global thing, and for us, we want our little teeny part of it to make perfect coffee.
The U.S. is possibly imposing tariffs. So I'm wondering, how would tariffs affect coffee around the world?
Well, around the world, tariffs with some of the coffee growing regions, export to the United States is a big thing. Colombia, as an example, was the most recent. They grow 12 to 14% of the world's coffee, and over 50% of their coffee goes directly to the United States. So any form of tariff with a high rate commodity like that would be very difficult for a country and other countries around the world as well.
Is it hard to get around using the United States?
Well, for instance, Cuba grows some spectacular coffee. Some of it does make its way to Canada, so it doesn't have to touch soil, but the largest broker houses in North America are East Coast, West Coast United States. And then the south would be New Orleans, for instance. So yeah, it would create an issue trying to go around it. Well, right out of the gate, if it happens, the first thing I'll notice is packaging for us. We use a specialty coffee bag that has a special bag, a special barrier. If Colombia, in fact, as one of the examples of the 12, 14 different coffees we get from different parts of the world, we would see that directly affect our green coffee purchasing as well.
Full pound or half pound today?
Now, from a consumer, some of the people that buy from you or other coffee shops around, maybe Canada, how would that affect, your
Well, it's a trickle down and trickle up effect. So unfortunately, if our green prices go up, our packaging prices go up, I have to share that with my clients. And in turn, those cafes and stores have to share that with their clients. So it works all the way down the pipeline. That's the way it is. You can only absorb so much. Now, coffee before the possible U.S. tariff issue, there's been a big rise in coffee over probably the last 18 months. And it's become a higher traded commodity, and that has driven the price, and not the farm and not the initial broker. It's how that coffee is traded globally.
Is that worrisome for you right now? Is this something that you're thinking as a business, How do I deal with this? Is this something that's on your mind right now?
Oh, it's on my mind all the time because I know it will affect my business. We're fortunate because we're well established. We're in our 24th year. As prices go up, it may change the number of clients I have, which would be unfortunate. But it is a fact of doing business, and either you ride it out or you make adjustments to it.
And that's the thing too. I noticed that you have employees here. How would that affect, say, having employees like the ones you have here?
Well, hopefully it won't affect my employees. Eventually, of course, the cost of everything will go up. So if that's the driver, then either our coffee prices, retail and wholesale, go up, or we reduce our employees, which is something I definitely do not want to do.
Now, Travis, I also know you've had experience living in the States. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the argument about bringing tariffs to tighten that up? I'm curious.
Well, it's kind of I think of course, the longest unprotected borders between Canada and the U.S., we're well aware of that. I don't think the problems coming out of Canada are as big as perhaps the problems coming out of the United States. That's just my opinion from what I've seen living in the U.S. and living in Canada. So I don't know. Will tariffs tighten up the border? I don't know. I think it creates fear, and fear creates reaction, and that might be the tightening up of the issue. A lot of Canadians go south of the border, a lot. A lot of them shop just south of the border. Think of those U.S. states and towns that may be affected by Canadians feeling uncomfortable going to the United States. I think that would be the short-term and long-term effect of border U.S. towns.
And do you think, buying Canadian, could it help to push back on U.S. tariffs?
Well, I think it could. Buying Canadian would help. But some of the stuff we're buying out of the U.S. is not made in the U.S. either. So we have to remember what buying Canadian means. It means Canadian produced, Canadian processed. Are we prepared to make those advancements? I would like to think we are. But buying out of the U.S., a lot of the goods we buy out of the U.S. are brought in offshore. As far as tariffs, I just want to remain a good neighbor. And I think there's ways of sorting it out.
So that is CBC's Jim Agapito, who was out speaking to Black Pearl owner Travis Boyd about the possibility of these tariffs tomorrow and how they could impact his coffee business. 8:18 is the time, minus 24 is the temperature in Winnipeg. And let's stay on this topic because as Donald Trump's re-election in the U.S., since he was re-elected, we've been talking so much about tariffs. There's the ongoing threats, and those are compelling, obviously, businesses to respond, but also some Manitobans to think about at the individual level, how and where could you shop and change your habits? A woman in Brandon says that choosing Canadian products over American ones is her way of promoting and supporting Canadian culture and the local economy. And next on the show, CBC Manitoba reporter Rosanna Hempel is here to talk about how she met up with Maria Askham at her home in Brandon. And Maria walked her through all these efforts she's making. Hi.
Good morning.
So Maria's changing the way she shops. What does that mean?
That's right. Well, she's checking her grocery labels more closely when she's out shopping. So she told me that she's prioritizing Canadian and Manitoba products. And when she can't do that, because of course, we don't grow or produce everything here in Manitoba, Maria says she'll also look for alternatives from other countries. And sometimes she finds that products do have a Canadian flag or that signature maple leaf on the packaging that identifies them as made in Canada. And sometimes for her, it's a matter of reading the fine print. So Maria told me that she also plans and researches in advance if she can't find enough information on a product. And she'll also go to local shops like bakeries and butchers. So here's what she told me about what's motivating her to do that.
I just think that we need to see this as a very positive step, and that supporting local, supporting Canadian products is important for our economy, important for our culture, important for our country, because we're Canadian. We're an amazing country.
And it's also U.S. President Donald Trump's comments about Canada, including ones about Canada becoming a part of the U.S. and his ongoing tariff threats that are motivating her to support Canadian products.
So I'm not anti-American. I will buy American products if I find that they're better than something else I've used. But I am far more vigilant now.
So all in all, she told me she doesn't feel comfortable sitting back right now, and that being more selective in what she buys is something that she can do in her everyday life.
So we've been having, different aspects of looking at this all morning because tomorrow's the day. So Donald Trump threatened to hit us with these 25% tariffs, Canada and Mexico, February 1st, tomorrow. He was citing border security issues as one of the reasons. So there's lots of analysis on that today. I know, though, that you didn't just talk to your guest. You also dropped by a local bakery to see how some others were feeling. What did they tell you?
Yeah, so I went to Chez Angela Bakery and Cafe in Brandon, and they told me that, customers and staff are talking about buying local and what the tariffs and potential retaliatory tariffs could look like. The bakery's manager, James Chambers, says buying local was already a priority for them, even before Trump was reelected.
We actually have over 25 local growers and producers that we source everything from flour to coffee to fruit to meat from, and in that process, over 80 cents on every dollar stays right here in our province. We're really proud of that, but it's a lot of work.
James told me that it is a matter of building and keeping those relationships with growers and producers. And overall, it is about 20 to 30% more expensive to source those products locally. And as you heard there, it is a bit more work. But he says it's definitely doable. And for him, it's worthwhile for his community and for environmental reasons. And he says the food tastes better, too. So here's his message for anyone interested in buying more local.
There's a lot of really great resources out there if you look for brand comparisons, U.S. source versus Canadian source. That's a really good start. But then check in with your local stores, those mom and pop shops that are owned locally. They've often already made an effort to find those relationships and are willing to help make those connections with you.
Now, he doesn't know exactly how any tariffs on Canadian goods would affect him or the people that he sources his food from. He's still in the process of figuring that out, and of course, it all hinges on whether these tariffs go ahead. The Brandon Chamber of Commerce says it is still a good opportunity for people to buy local and, put a bit more thought into what they spend their money on and where. The Chamber's president, Lois Rustin, agrees, though, that it can be a bit more complicated than we think.
That can be tricky, and certainly isn't that alone isn't going to address some of the significant impacts that these tariffs may have. But it's a great first step.
Just to sort of build on that, a lot of economists do say that buying Canadian is more complicated than consumers might assume. What more do you have to say about that? Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so your listeners might remember hearing an economist from Ontario on this show earlier this week. Viet Vu is the manager of economic research at the DAIS, a public policy think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University. And he says breaking down where every single ingredient in a product is from can get complicated. And one of the easiest things people can do is to buy what's in season. So now with it being winter here, that might look like things like broccoli, leeks, potatoes, that kind of thing. And, if these tariffs go ahead, he says, as we've heard a lot of people say, that it would be devastating for the economy. But, he expects the market to adjust. And here's what he said that might look like.
You'll find that suppliers who are price sensitive will start pursuing trade or sourcing with other countries or getting stuff locally because those end up being cheaper. So it's not an ideal world that I'm painting here, but in a perverse way, buying locally will become easier because many producers will have no better choice.
Coming back to Maria Askham and Brandon, she feels that choosing Canadian and Manitoba products is what she can do right now, and she hopes others join her.
And they don't have to be big choices. You don't have to stand on a hill and wave our flag and say, no, Canada's not for sale. Just simple things by looking for Canadian products, buying local. Sometimes they're a little bit more expensive, but it's supporting our people, the people of our community, our farmers, and our workers.
And that's why she is spending a bit more time reading those grocery labels and researching an extra 10 or 15 minutes online.
Thanks for bringing this in. I know we've been asking for people if they're doing this, so it's really interesting to hear Maria already committing to it. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is the CBC's Rosanna Hempel, and you can read more about the story on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Also, I do believe that we've posted that interview with Viet Vu. I forgot about that. It was a really good interview. Lots more in that as well. I think that's up on our YouTube stream, so you can check it out online.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The Cost of Living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
8:25 the time right now, -24 the temperature, extreme cold warning, wind chills around -45 for areas like Lynn Lake, Leaf Rapids, Puckatawagan, Brochet, and to Dooley Lake. Winnipeg going to feel like -35, you likely already know. Clear, cold, and beautiful. That's how these days go, and that's what we're going to get. Our list of people we have to thank is long. It's Friday, and I'm glad to share it with you. This is all of the people that work on all of our programs locally here at CBC in our current affairs unit. So they are our associate producers, Corey Funk, Abby Adeyemi, Kalkadamu Ageda, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, Carmen Ponto, Rosanna Hempel, Marshall Hodgins, and Dylan Longhurst. Rosanna with her contribution just now, as you heard. Also in our unit, Issa Kixon, Chloe Friesen, and Bruce Layden. Our current affairs reporters, Shanley Vidal and Jim Agapito. Our hosts in unit, Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundel, Margot Watt this week as well. Producers, Wendy Parker and Donna Carrero working in unit as well this week. And YouTube producers, Travis Peterson, Anderson and Kevin Ipatebo. Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer overall in current affairs, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio. Big thanks to all of you. You know, we have a morning show, a noon show, up to speed each and every day. There's the weekend morning shows. We also produce a podcast, and we have all kinds of different local content online as well. So everyone's really busy and just really trying to get those local perspectives out there. So we appreciate all of your work on all the programs. And of course, biggest thanks to you listeners, because you're talking to us and you're sharing your community with us. So we appreciate you. Well, just ahead of the news this morning, we want to talk about feeling sick. There's a lot of people feeling sick right now, right? Last day of January. If it's not you, it might be someone you know. This is usually when flu season peaks, but this time around, there are some other viruses also coming into play. Some doctors are calling the simultaneous spread this year a quademic. Dr. Shazma Mathani is an emergency room physician in Edmonton, and she explains why quademic is an apt name for what doctors are seeing.
When you break down the word quad, four, and demic, kind of the spread of these diseases, it really makes sense. So there's four kind of viruses that we're seeing right now: norovirus, RSV, COVID-19, and influenza. And we are, according kind of to CDC data, which tends to represent Canadian data quite closely as well, we are seeing all four of these in quite high numbers right now. There's often a common misconception that you can only have one virus at a time, but you can definitely have multiple viruses at a time. I've certainly seen in the patients that I'm seeing in the emergency department, people having 2, sometimes 3 of these viruses all at the same time, like swabbing positive for them. And it certainly has a cumulative effect in terms of making you feel much worse and can make you much sicker. So when we talk about things like influenza, COVID-19, and RSV, those are predominantly respiratory symptoms. So the typical cough and cold symptoms where you'd have a cough, sore throat, runny nose, fever, sometimes shortness of breath. Those are all those 3 respiratory viruses. Sometimes they can have gastrointestinal effects as well, but that's mainly norovirus. So norovirus is kind of pretty located to the gastrointestinal tract. So you get abdominal cramping, vomiting, severe diarrhea, and a fever as well. And so that's kind of what sometimes can distinguish them. There have been many cases that I've seen myself where sometimes it's the respiratory symptoms start first. So they have that classic sore throat, fever, cough, runny nose, and then those gastrointestinal symptoms come later. And it's hard to sometimes know whether that's from the one of those first 3 viruses that I mentioned, COVID, flu, and RSV, because they can have gastrointestinal symptoms, or whether it's an additional virus that they've caught, like norovirus as well. One of the most common questions I get is, well, why does it feel like we're sick all the time? Or why does it feel like just as I get better, I get another illness? And it is, there's so many viruses circulating. The quademic identifies these 4 viruses that are tested for and looked for in the wastewater. But there's so many other circulating viruses that we don't really test for as well that can cause similar symptoms. And so because they're so easily transmissible by contact and droplet, it's very common with such high levels of all of these viruses to be better from one and then catch another one pretty quickly thereafter.
So that's Dr. Shazma Mathani, an emergency room physician in Edmonton, talking about the quademic: flu, COVID-19, RSV, and norovirus. If you want to read about which of those are surging in Manitoba and what's present here, please go to the provincial health websites. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's minus 24. It's the last day of January, and we're feeling like it. Although we have a high today of minus 18. By tomorrow, it's February, and we warm up with a bit of snow. Some post-secondary students wonder when Manitoba's government is going to make good on a promise to restore their health coverage. Universal coverage for international students was eliminated in 2018 by the former PC government. NDP leader Wab Kinew promised to restore it before being elected in 2023. 15 months later, it still hasn't happened. Anogu Okudo is a Nigerian student who recently graduated with a degree in computer science from Brandon University. He recalls a visit to a clinic where he was told he'd have to pay $200 up front before he could see a doctor.
Just left because if you check and you see that you don't have enough funds to cover that for that moment, there's no point to have that debate.
The NDP government says it is reviewing how best to provide health care coverage to international students. A 2-year-old girl who was killed in Bloodvein last week is being remembered as a happy toddler. Roberta Goosehead says she raised her niece, Josiah Young, from birth. She says Josiah loved all kinds of music.
She loved to dance. Like, dancing was her thing. She would dance from anything from Zumba to jigging to pop dancing. She just loved the music.
Goosehead says she gave the child to her maternal grandmother in October because she couldn't manage having a job and a young child. RCMP say the child was taken to the nursing station in Bloodvein with serious injuries last Friday. Her 56-year-old grandmother is now charged with second-degree murder. A Winnipeg journalist is fighting to keep an interview out of the hands of police. City News reporter Morgan Majeski is challenging a production order obtained by detectives. Police want a copy of his unedited interview with the father of a man charged in a mass shooting on Langside in 2023. Officers argue he refused to give investigators a full statement. Majeski's lawyer, Ian McKinnon, says handing over that interview would be a slippery slope.
Journalists, it's critical to maintain certain credibility and impartiality and distance from certainly the police and the Crown, and be objective and not seen to be in any way connected as some sort of investigative arm of the police or the state.
Majeski's employer, Rogers Media, is allowing Majeski to challenge the order on his own. No date for a decision has been given. Winnipeg City Council has slapped Russ Wyatt with a public reprimand. The Transcona councillor came under fire in 2023 after publicly suggesting Winnipeg's chief administrative officer should be fired over a multi-million-dollar court judgment that went against the city. A report by an outside integrity commissioner said Wyatt should be made to apologize for his comments. He was given one last chance at last night's council meeting, but refused, saying it would send a terrible message.
There's no accountability, it seems, inside the city of Winnipeg when it comes to being found liable in a court for malfeasance. You could have a $5 million award against the very employer that you're working for because of your actions, and there are no consequences, no accountability, no transparency.
The vote to reprimand Wyatt was 12-2. Councillors Jason Schreier and Sherry Rollins were the only dissenters. Brandon grade 8 student Eric Cerqueira says he has friends who come to school hungry. To help them, Cerqueira is volunteering with Harvest Manitoba's Meals to Go program. It made its first delivery to his school yesterday. Meals to Go will now be in Brandon every week, making sure students have healthy food to take home on the weekend. The King George School student says helping carry in those food boxes was hard work, but was worth it.
A lot of good stuff, and it was helping kids that didn't have breakfast, and I wanted to be in it and help because it's a good thing for all of us.
And among that good stuff in those meal kits, fresh dairy products, fruit, veggies, and other snacks. Meals to Go will be at Betty Gibson and King George schools every Friday. Along with Brandon, the program recently expanded to a Pasquay at Cree Nation. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather, for the week. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Our news department this week, of course, Heather Wells each and every morning, and then Megan Ketchison, as well as Joni Nicolo and Aaron Broman. Thank you all for all your work. And let's get to a last look at what's happening on the commute. It's been quiet.
Yeah, but the new development here, King Edward and Ellis, there's a multi-vehicle collision blocking the southbound right curb lane and the eastbound curb lane on King Edward. So look out for that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Glad you popped in. And Abby?
Temperatures will be extremely cold with the north facing that dangerous lows, and the wind chills are near -50, while down south the regions will be seeing some sunshine later, though the wind chill is going to be near -40. Winnipeg right now -24, some sunshine in the forecast, and we warm up to a high of -18, though some snow will be rolling in overnight.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Big thanks to everyone for listening this morning. And just a reminder, if you can't listen to the whole show, or if you missed the show and then you think, oh, I wish I had, a little bit more of a bite-sized take, we have a podcast. This is Manitoba. So every day we don't waste your time. We pick things to build on, and we build on parts of the show that you may hear or may have missed. So this is Manitoba, the podcast. You can check it out online wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well, and we hope you tune in again Monday to Information Radio here on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. The Current. Coming up next. Have a good weekend, everyone.